The pack came out of the tall grass at a dead run, 40 of them, low and gray and silent, and the human girl in the middle of the north pen did not turn around. Prefect Threll saw it from the observation gantry and felt his throat close. He had read the classification file on the flight in. He had read it twice, the way a careful administrator reads anything that might later be used against him. Deathworld, Category Primal. The highest lethality rating the concordance assigned to any body in the surveyed arm. The file used the word extinction 11 times. It described the local apex species. The Solvarn, the surveyors had named them, from an old word meaning the thing in the grass you never hear. As pack hunters of such coordination that a single group could strip a landed shuttle of everything organic before the crew finished dying. And here was one of the station's keepers standing in an open field with a bucket in one hand, while 40 of them closed the distance at the speed of a falling stone. He gripped the rail. Beside him, his junior assessor, a young Sade named Sesh, made a sound like water leaving a pipe. "Get her out," Threll said. His translator flattened the panic in his voice into something official. "Sesh, the alarm. Where is the containment alarm?" Sesh's 4 eyes had gone to their smallest, hardest points. "There is no alarm, Prefect. The field is down in that pen. It has been down since we arrived." Below them, the pack reached the girl. Threll had spent 40 years in the provisioning arm of the Concordance, and he had seen a great many things end. He had watched a hull come apart. He had watched a colony vote itself into a famine. He had once, early, been made to stand at a decommissioning and watch a thing that should not have been allowed to happen anyway, and he had learned from it the one lesson that had carried him upward through 4 decades of careful work. You do not look away, because the ones who look away are the ones who get asked afterward why they did nothing. So he did not look away now. He made himself watch the girl die. She did not die. The first Solvarn hit the grass in front of her and folded down onto its haunches so fast it seemed to fall, and the ones behind it broke around her like a river around a post, 40 animals splitting into 2 gray streams that ran past her on both sides close enough to stir her coveralls, and not one of them touched her. She tipped the bucket. Something dark and wet went out of it into the trough at her feet. The pack turned in the space of a breath, the whole mass of them wheeling as if they shared one spine, and came back, and she put a flat hand out at the shoulder of the nearest, and it stopped as though it had struck a wall she alone could see. Then she scratched it under the jaw. "Prefect," Sesh said very quietly. "Prefect, I don't," the file said. "I know what the file said." The file had said the Solvarn could not be tamed, gentled, trained, contained by any means short of a hard field or a hard kill. The file had said that in the 90 years since the Concordance first flagged this world, 4 separate contractors had tried to establish a research presence on the surface and 4 separate contractors had left in a hurry minus personnel, and that the current arrangement, a single small station, a handful of human keepers, funded on a hardship line item that some provisioning clerk had clearly forgotten to cancel, survived only because of the containment grid, the Great Fence. The reason Threll had come. He looked at the girl scratching an apex predator under the jaw the way another person might scratch a house animal, and he thought, the grid is a lie then, or she is, one of the two. He was wrong about both, but it would take him the rest of the day to learn how wrong, and by then the learning would cost him something he had spent 40 years accumulating and could not get back. Her name was Ren Ostrek, and she had been born on the deathworld the Concordance called Harrow, and everyone who lived on it called Tumble, and she was 22 years old, and she was thinking about the trough drain, which was clogged again. She had felt the shuttle come down an hour ago. You felt them before you heard them, a pressure behind the sternum, and she knew what it meant, because Van had come out to the pens at first light with his face folded up and told her the provisioning ship was real, was arriving, was not a rumor after all. So she knew there were officials on the gantry watching her feed the North Pack, and she knew, roughly, what officials watching her feed the North Pack would feel, because she had grown up watching that exact expression arrive on the faces of every off-worlder her parents had ever hosted. She had a private name for it. She called it the drop, the way a face dropped when the pack came out of the grass, the way it dropped again, differently, when nothing happened. She let them watch. Bishop leaned his whole weight into her hand and she took it, all of it, feet braced, because if you did not brace Bishop he would put you on the ground affectionately, and that was its own kind of problem. He was the biggest thing on the north line, gray going to white along the ridge of his back, one ear notched from something that had happened before she was old enough to remember, and he was, in the way that mattered, the oldest friend she had that still breathed. She had helped her mother pull him out of a collapsed den as a pup 9 years back, a wet gray scrap that fit in 2 cupped human hands and had screamed the whole way home. He did not fit in 2 hands now. He fit against her side like weather. "Drains clogged," she told him, because you told Bishop things, it settled him, the sound of a low human voice with no fear in it. "Going to have to pull the grate." Behind her, up on the gantry, a translator crackled and said something in the flat, overpolite register the concordance machines used, and she caught the word keeper and the word irregular and stopped listening. She had a job. The job was 40 apex predators and a broken drain and a station that ran on a budget you could count on one hand, and none of that changed because a ship had come. Meg came through the grass then, low and quick, belly nearly to the ground, and Wren felt the whole shape of the pack shift around her. Not away, exactly, but into order, the loose gray sprawl tightening into something with edges. The old dog did that. She was a border collie, earth stock, black and white gone gray at the muzzle and along the backs of her legs, 12 years old and half-deaf and entirely certain of her own authority, and she came around the outside of the pack in a wide, clean arc with her head down and her eyes up and fixed, and the Solvarn gave her the line. They always gave her the line. A 200-kilo apex predator would step sideways to keep out of the path of 13 kilos of old earth dog, and Wren had stopped being surprised by it so long ago that she had trouble, sometimes, remembering that it was strange. Meg dropped into a crouch at the edge of the trough, one paw lifted, and held. The pack settled around the food in the order the old dog's crouch told them to settle in. Bishop ate first. He always ate first. That was not the dog's doing. That was older than the dog. But the order behind Bishop, who ate second, who waited, who did not crowd, that the old collie ran like a foreman, with a lifted lip and a hard eye, and once, a single short step forward that sent a young male backward 3 body lengths as though he'd been struck. Up on the gantry, the translator had gone quiet. Wren glanced up, finally, and got her first clear look at the delegation. There were 6 of them at the rail. 4 she didn't bother to sort: guards, aides, the usual freight of a concordance visit. 2 she marked. The tall plated one in the gray overrobe with the olfactory rank collar, standing very still with both hands on the rail. That was the one in charge. You could always tell the one in charge because the fear cost them the most and they hit it the hardest. And a small scaled one beside him, 4 eyes, young, who had not managed to hide it at all and was staring down at Meg with an expression Wren recognized, because it was the same expression the pack wore the first time they'd met the dog. It was recognition. It was an animal looking at something and understanding, on a level below thought, that it was in the presence of a thing that outranked it. "Meg," Wren said. "That'll do." The old dog broke off the eye, trotted to Wren, and sat on her foot, leaning, tongue out, entirely pleased with herself. Wren rested a hand on her head. "Company," she told the dog. Meg thumped her tail twice against the churned dirt, and did not otherwise commit to an opinion. They received the delegation in the mess, because the mess was the only room in the station with enough chairs, and because Van had said, with the particular stubbornness he saved for occasions like this, that they would receive the concordance with tea whether the concordance deserved tea or not. Van Ostrek was Wren's uncle, her father's brother, and he ran the station now in the sense that someone had to sign the forms. He was broad and slow and gray-bearded, and he had come to Tumble as a young man to help his brother build the pens and had never left, not when the pens killed his brother, not when the funding nearly died 3 separate times, not when every reasonable person he'd ever met told him a human station on a Category Primal world was a slow way to bury a family. He set out the tea. His hands did not shake. Ren watched the delegation watch his hands not shake and understood that this, too, was a kind of message being sent. The tall plated one folded himself into a chair that was too small for him and did not touch the tea. "I am Prefect Threll," he said through the collar translator of the provisioning arm. "This is Junior Assessor Sesh. I will be direct because I have found that directness is a courtesy and its absence a cruelty." He set a data slate on the table and turned it so they could see it. "This station operates on a hardship provision that has not been reviewed in 19 years. The review is overdue. I am here to conduct it. I will be honest with you about the likely outcome, because you deserve to hear it from a person and not from a form. I intend to recommend closure." Nobody said anything. Meg, under the table, sighed and put her chin on Ren's boot. "The Concordance does not maintain deathworld presences for sentiment," Threll went on. "It maintains them for return. This world returns nothing. It consumes a survey line, a supply run every 11 cycles, and a great deal of institutional anxiety, and in exchange it produces a species classification that could as easily be maintained from orbit and a population of 6 human keepers who, I will note, appear to be the only sapients in the surveyed arm who choose to live here." He tilted his head, a gesture Ren had learned to read on his kind as something between apology and dissection. "I watched your keeper feed the North Pack from the gantry. It was a remarkable thing to see. I want to be clear that my recommendation is not a judgment of your competence. It is a judgment of your world." "You watched her feed the North Pack," Van said, "with the field down." "I did. And that didn't answer any questions for you." "It raised several." Threll's hands settled flat on the table. "I would like to understand the containment grid before I finalize my findings. Your operating grant describes it as the sole factor permitting human survival on the surface. I would like to see it functioning. I would like, specifically, to understand what happens to your keeper out there when it fails." And that was the moment. Ren would fix on it later, turning it over, the way you turn over the one loose stone that started the slide. That was the moment the whole day changed direction, because Van opened his mouth to answer honestly, and Ren, who was 22 and had been born on this world and had spent her entire life learning exactly how much truth off-worlders could hold, put her hand flat on the table and said, "Nothing happens to me." Threll's four-eyed assistant flinched. The prefect himself went very still. "I beg your pardon," he said. "When the field fails," Ren said, "nothing happens to me, that's what you're asking. I've been on the wrong side of a down field more times than I can count. Every keeper here has. The grid isn't for us." "Then who," said the prefect slowly, "is it for?" Ren looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Van, who had closed his mouth and was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something that might have been warning and might have been permission. "It's for you," she said. "It's so people like you can sleep on the supply ship." Sesh had joined the provisioning arm 11 cycles ago because the provisioning arm did not, as a rule, go anywhere dangerous. This was the entire reason. Sesh's clutch siblings had gone into survey and into the wardens and into the loud, glorious arms of the Concordance where a young Sade could get eaten. And Sesh had looked at all of that and chosen the arm that reviewed hardship grants and audited supply lines and filed, quietly, findings. Sesh had wanted a life composed entirely of rooms with chairs in them. And now Sesh was on a Category Primal deathworld watching a human girl tell a prefect of the provisioning arm that the great containment grid, the grid named in the operating grant, the grid that 11 separate concordance documents cited as the load-bearing miracle, keeping 6 soft mammals alive among the worst predators in the arm, was theater. For him, so people like him could sleep. Sesh believed her instantly and completely, and could not have said why. Part of it was the dog. Sesh kept coming back to the dog. Sesh had grown up on stories of the Warden's war beasts, the great trained hunters the Concordance's martial arm kept for boarding actions and riot lines, and Sesh had seen one up close exactly once, at a posting ceremony, and had not slept well for 3 nights afterward. The Warden's beasts had a quality to them, a pressure, a sense that the air around them was under more weight than the air anywhere else. The little earth animal under the table had that quality. It was 13 kilos of black and white fur with a gray face and a tongue that lolled, and it radiated the exact same pressure as a 2-ton war beast. And it was, at this moment, asleep on the girl's boot. "The Grant," Threll said, and his voice had changed, not softened but sharpened, the voice of an administrator who has just realized the document in front of him may be fiction and needs, immediately, to know how much of it. "The Grant states that the containment grid is essential. That statement has been renewed by this station's own staff at every review for 90 years. If it is false, that is a falsification of a concordance record across 9 decades. Do you understand what you are telling me?" "I understand what I'm telling you," Ren said. "Then tell me why." The girl was quiet for a moment. Under the table, the old dog's leg twitched, running in a dream. "Because the first time an off-worlder saw the real thing," she said, "he tried to shoot it. That was the second contractor before I was born. My father was there. The man saw a keeper standing in a pack with no field up, and he decided the keeper had to be a hostage or a fool or bait, because those were the only 3 things that made sense to him, and he raised his weapon and my father," she stopped. "Reset. My father spent the next 30 years making sure no off-worlder ever saw the real thing again. He built the grid twice as strong as it needed to be. He wrote the grant to make the grid the story. Because the story people could hold was, humans survive here because of a very good fence. The story people could not hold was the true one, and every time somebody tried to hold the true one, somebody reached for a weapon, and the pack does not care for weapons." "And the true one," Threll said, "is what?" Ren looked at him. "You already saw it," she said. "You just haven't decided to believe it yet." They walked the line after that, because Threll insisted, and because Van, with a glance at Ren, allowed it. The containment grid ran the perimeter of the station's cleared ground in a double row of emitter posts twice the height of a man, and it hummed. And where it ran, the grass on the far side stood tall and untrodden, and the grass on the near side was cropped and churned, and it looked, Sesh thought, exactly like what it claimed to be. The one thing standing between the soft, warm station and the worst world in the arm. Threll walked the whole length of it slowly, reading it, and Sesh walked behind him reading Threll, and the human girl walked ahead of both of them with the old dog at her heel, and neither of them looked at the fence the way you looked at a thing you depended on. They looked at it the way you looked at a wall in your own house. It was just there. It held up a roof. You did not think about it. At the north gate, Threll stopped. "Open it," he said. Ren's uncle had come up behind them, breathing hard from the walk. "Prefect." "I am not asking your keeper to go through it," Threll said. "I am asking you to open the gate, and I am going to stand at the threshold, and I am going to watch what the animals on the other side do when a scent they do not know stands in the gap. If the grant is true, if the grid is the only thing keeping them off you, then they will come. And I will step back, and you will close the gate, and I will have my answer, and I will write that this station's grant is honest, and its world is lethal, and its people are brave. And I will recommend closure anyway, because bravery is not a return. But I will have looked." "Open it." Sesh watched the human girl and the human uncle exchange a look that had a whole history folded into it. Then Ren stepped forward. "I'll open it," she said. "You stand behind me." "That defeats the purpose. Your scent is known to them. Mine is the test." "I know," Ren said. "That's why you stand behind me, because you're right that they'll come. Something new at the north gate. They'll all come, 40 of them, to see it. And the thing they're coming to see is you. And I would like you to still be alive to write your report, Prefect, so you're going to stand behind me and you're going to keep your hands where they are, and whatever you do, you are not going to raise them. Not to point. Not to protect your face. Not for any reason. Can you do that? Threll looked down at her for a long moment. Sesh, watching, had the sudden vertiginous sense of two apex creatures taking each other's measure, and could not afterward have said which of the two was which. I can do that, the prefect said. Wren put her hand on the gate release. Meg, she said, with me. The old dog rose, shook once, and set herself at the girl's left knee, facing the grass, and went absolutely still. And Sesh, who had come to the provisioning arm to live a life composed entirely of rooms with chairs in them, felt every plate on his body draw tight, because he had seen that stillness before, once on a war beast at a posting ceremony, and it was the stillness of a thing that has decided it is in charge of what happens next. Wren opened the gate. They came the way weather comes. There was the grass, standing tall and empty, gold-green under the flat white noon of the tumble sky, and then there was no empty grass at all. There was the pack, pouring toward the gap in a single gray motion, and Sesh heard the prefect's breath go out of him in a long, controlled hiss and heard, from further back, one of the guards make a sound that the guard would later deny making. Wren did not move. The old dog did not move, and the pack hit the invisible line of the two of them and broke. Sesh would spend a long time trying to describe it accurately, later in the report, and would fail, because the report wanted words like halted and deterred, and the truth had no deterrence in it. The pack did not stop the way a thing stops when it hits a wall. It stopped the way water stops rising when it reaches its level. The lead animal, the great gray one with the white ridge and the notched ear, the one the keeper had called Bishop, flowed up to within a body length of the girl and dropped its enormous head and pushed its muzzle, gently, into her stomach, and she rocked back a half step and put her hand on the crown of its skull, and behind it the whole pack settled into the grass in a loose crescent, 40 apex predators arranging themselves in the noon sun like a village coming out to see who had arrived. And every single one of them was looking at Threll. Don't move, Wren said without turning around. Her voice was low and even and carried no more urgency than a woman commenting on the weather. They're reading you, that's all. Let them read you. Threll did not move. Sesh, half a step behind him, did not move either, and discovered that not moving in front of 40 apex predators required a specific and total muscular effort, a clenching of every part of the body at once, and that the human girl was doing it, apparently without effort, was in fact scratching the notched ear of the largest predator in the arm, while 40 of its kin studied the two concordance officials for whatever it was they were studying them for. The great gray one raised its head off the girl's stomach. It turned to look at her. Sesh saw the huge dark eye swivel, and then it looked back at Threll, and then it did a thing that Sesh's mind refused for a moment to process. It stepped in front of her. Not toward Threll, in front of the girl. It placed its bulk between the human keeper and the two strangers at the gate, and it lowered its head, and the notched ear went flat, and it made a sound Sesh felt in the floor of his own chest, a sound below hearing, and the whole crescent of the pack rose out of the grass at once, and Sesh understood with total clarity that he was about to watch two concordance officials die, and that he was one of them. Bishop, Wren said, leave it. The pack stopped. It stopped the way a held breath stops. The great gray one froze mid-motion with its weight forward and its head low, and Sesh watched the animal's whole body take the instruction, watched the tension go out of the notched ear, watched it. There was no other word decide. It turned its head and looked back at the girl, and she stepped up beside it and put her hand flat on the ridge of its back and said again, quietly, leave it. He's not for you. He's just looking. Let him look. And the great gray predator of a Category Primal deathworld, apex of the worst pack in the surveyed arm, sat down in the grass beside a 22-year-old human woman and let the strangers look. Close the gate now, Van, Wren said, still quiet, still not turning. Slow, Prefect, you can step back slowly, hands down. Threll stepped back. Sesh saw that the Prefect's hands were shaking, finally, the way a plated hand shakes when its owner has spent every reserve holding it still, and he saw the Prefect notice his own hands shaking, and he saw the exact moment the Prefect made them stop by force of will, and he thought, he will never forgive her for seeing that. Sesh was right about that, too, though not in the way he expected. The gate hummed closed. On the far side the pack rose, unhurried, and drifted back into the tall grass, and the great gray one went last, pausing once at the tree line to look back, not at Threll, not at Sesh, at the girl, before the gold-green closed over it and there was only the empty field again, and the flat white noon, and the sound of the grid resuming its low, even hum as though nothing had happened at all. For a while nobody spoke. Well, Van said finally, dusting his hands on his trousers, tea's gone cold, I'll make more. Threll did not sleep that night, and he was honest enough with himself to know why. It was not fear, though there had been fear and plenty of it standing at that gate, fear he could file. Fear was a data point. He had felt it in the presence of hard vacuum and hostile creditors, and once, memorably, a superior who had turned out to be embezzling, and he had learned that fear told you only that a situation was dangerous, which you generally already knew. No. What kept the Prefect awake in the narrow guest bunk of Harrow Station, staring at a ceiling of exposed conduit while the deathworld ticked and settled in the dark outside, was something worse than fear. It was that the girl had been right. Nothing had happened to her. He had constructed his entire understanding of this world, his findings, half-drafted, his recommendation, all but signed on a single load-bearing fact, and the fact was the fence. Remove the fence and the humans died. That was the world. That was why closure was mercy and not cruelty. That was why he could recommend the end of this place with a clear conscience, because he was not condemning these people. He was merely declining to keep funding a wall between them and an inevitability. And the girl had walked him to the fence and opened it and shown him that the fence held nothing back that wanted her. The pack had not come for her. It had come for him, the stranger, the new scent, and then it had put itself between the strangers and the girl, and then when she spoke, it had sat down. He turned the words over, leave it, he's not for you, as though she were calling a hunting animal off a kill. As though the two concordance officials had been, for one moment at that gate, prey that a human woman had chosen to spare. Threll had spent 40 years believing certain things about the shape of the galaxy, and one of them was this, that the concordance's arm reached everywhere, and that at the far end of every reach was, ultimately, force. Not cruelty. Threll was not a cruel administrator, whatever his findings cost, but force. The quiet knowledge that behind every grant and every review and every polite closure there stood, if it were ever truly needed, the wardens and their beasts and the hard field and the hard kill. That was the floor under the galaxy. That was what let a small, scaled clerk and a tall, plated prefect sit in a room with dangerous strangers and remain, ultimately, safe. The knowledge that force answered to the concordance, and the concordance answered to reason, and reason was a thing his kind held and the deathworld did not. And a human girl had stood him at a gate and shown him that the worst force in the arm answered to a soft, warm mammal with a bucket, because it wanted to, and that the only thing standing between the concordance and the deathworld's real answer was that same girl's willingness to say leave it. He was still awake when the station's daylights came up. He rose and he cleaned himself, and he put on the gray overrobe with the rank collar, and he went to find the warden. The warden's name was Osprith, and she had come down on the supply ship with a single crate the size of a shuttle, and inside the crate was a cos. Sesh had not known the warden was aboard until the crate opened. Provisioning ships did not, as a rule, carry wardens, and they did not, as a rule, carry cos. And the fact that this one had carried both was the kind of thing a junior assessor filed away with a cold feeling and told no one. Akas was the warden's first-line containment beast, bred over 400 cycles from the apex predator of some other conquered world, and it stood at the shoulder as tall as a sage stood at full height, and it was armored along the spine and jaw with plates the wardens fused to it in youth. And it wore always the black harness of its handler's control, and it was, by every measure the concordance kept, the most dangerous single organism the martial arm could put on the ground. Threll had it walked out to the north pen at first light. "I want a controlled comparison," he told them, standing at the gantry rail with the day barely up and the grass still silver with dew. His voice had recovered its administrative flatness overnight. Sesh noted this and did not like it. "The keeper claims the local animals are not held back by the grid. Very well, I accept the possibility, but I will not build a finding on one demonstration staged by the subjects of the review. Warden Osprith will bring the cost to the fence line. The cost is a known quantity. Its responses are documented across 600 containment actions. I want to see how the local apex responds to a rival apex it does not know, a predator with no relationship to any human. If the local animals are governed by nothing but the girl's rapport, they will treat the cost as they treated me, as a stranger to be assessed. If they are governed by something else, something the girl has not told us, we will see that too." Wren had come up onto the gantry in time to hear the last of it, the old dog at her heel, and Sesh watched her face as she took in the cost, and saw her jaw tighten, and understood that whatever the prefect thought he was about to test, the keeper thought he was about to make a mistake. "Take it back to the crate," Wren said. "Assessor Sesh," Threll said, not looking at her, "log the keeper's objection. Warden, proceed." "Prefect?" Wren stepped in front of him, a small thing, a slight scaled and soft shape stepping into the eyeline of a concordance prefect, and it should have been nothing, and it stopped him. "Your beast wears a harness. It answers to a handler. Its whole life it has been the most dangerous thing in every room it's ever walked into, because that's what the wardens made it for. That works everywhere in the arm because everywhere in the arm it's true." She jerked her chin at the grass. "It's not true here. This is the one place in the arm it isn't true, and your beast doesn't know that, and it's going to find out at the fence line, and I can't call it off the way I can call off mine, because it isn't mine and it doesn't know me. Take it back to the crate." "The Kas," said Warden Osprith, speaking for the first time in the clipped even register of the martial arm, "has held a line against a boarding swarm of 200. It has never yielded ground. Not once, Keeper, in 600 actions." She looked down at the old collie at Wren's heel, and something moved at the corner of her mouth. "I do not think your local animals, however striking, will trouble it, and I do not think your farm dog will either." Meg, at the word dog, looked up at the warden with mild interest and then dismissed her. "I'm not worried about my dog," Wren said. "I'm worried about yours." They brought the cost to the fence line anyway. Threll had authority, and Osprith had confidence, and Van Sesh saw the old human make the calculation, decided that this was a battle he could not win, and that the least bad outcome was to let the concordance learn its lesson on the concordance's own animal rather than on a keeper. So Van said nothing, and Wren said nothing more, though she took the old dog and clipped a lead to its collar for the first time Sesh had seen, and stood well back with the lead wound twice around her fist, and Sesh noted that too, and filed it, and felt the cold feeling grow. The Kas came down the churned path between the emitter posts like a piece of siege equipment. It did not pull at the harness. It did not need to. Everything about it, the low armored head, the slow deliberate placement of each foot, the way the guards on the gantry drew back from the rail as it passed beneath them, said that here at last was the real thing, the actual floor under the galaxy, the force that all the polite grants ultimately rested on. Osprith walked at its shoulder with the control baton loose in one hand and her whole body easy, the ease of someone who has stood beside the most dangerous thing in the room so many times that the danger has become a kind of comfort. They stopped at 10 paces from the north gate. On the far side, the grass was empty. "There's nothing there," said one of the guards, and Sesh heard the relief in it. The hope that maybe the local pack had simply moved on, that maybe this would be an anticlimax, a walk to a fence and a walk back, a finding of no result. "They're there," Ren said quietly. "They came up the second the Cos cleared the station. They're just in the grass, that's what they do. You never see the thing in the grass. That's the whole point of them." Threll leaned toward the rail. "Warden, advance it to the line." Osprith touched the baton to the Cos's armored flank, and the great beast took 3 slow steps forward, and put its head over the threshold of the open gate. And for one long moment nothing at all happened, and Sesh began, foolishly, to breathe. Then the Cos stopped breathing. It did not flinch. It did not back away. It simply, Sesh had no other word, arrested, every part of it going rigid at once. The slow siege machine advanced, freezing mid-step with one armored foot still lifted, and its head came up off the threshold and turned slowly to look at a specific point in the empty grass. And Sesh followed its gaze and saw nothing, and the Cos saw everything. "Warden," Threll said. "Report, what is it doing?" Osprith did not answer immediately. Sesh looked at her and saw that the ease had gone out of her body. She was staring at her own animal the way a person stares at a familiar face that has begun, suddenly, to do something unfamiliar. She stopped, started again, and her clipped register had a hairline crack in it now. "It has gone to a defensive hold. That's Prefect, that's the posture it takes when it's outnumbered, and it knows it. It hasn't taken that posture in." She looked at the empty grass. "There's nothing there. There's nothing there to outnumber it." "There's 40, Ren said. "There's always 40. Bishop brings the whole line to the fence for anything new. Your beast is counting them, that's what it's doing. It can smell them and hear them, and it's counting them, and it's got to 40, and it's realized it's 10 paces past a gate on the wrong side of a number it can't win." She wound the dog's lead once more around her fist. "It's a very good animal, Warden. It's smarter than you're giving it credit for. It knows exactly what's in that grass. You're the only one here who doesn't." The Cos made a sound. Sesh had heard the war beasts of the Wardens make many sounds in the propaganda broadcasts. The great rolling challenge roar that opened every recruitment reel. The sound that was supposed to make a young Sade's blood run hot with the glory of the martial arm. This was not that sound. This was small and high, and it came from the back of the great armored throat, and it was the sound of the most dangerous organism the Concordance could field asking, very quietly, to leave. "Back it off the line," Osprith said, and now the crack in her voice had opened all the way. "Back it off. Now, Prefect, I'm backing it off." "You will hold it at the line," Threll said. "This is the test. I need to see what the local—" "Prefect, with respect, the test is concluded." Osprith was already walking backward, drawing the Cos with her, and the great beast was in fact coming faster than she'd asked, was retreating from the empty grass with a haste that 600 containment actions had never once put into it. "The test is concluded. Your local apex has beaten my Cos without one of them showing itself. Log it however you want. I am not leaving my animal at that gate." Threll did not accept the Cos's retreat as an answer. Sesh had known he wouldn't. A prefect who built findings on demonstrations he did not stage was not going to close a review on the strength of one animal losing its nerve. And so within the hour he had summoned Ren back to the operations room and laid a new proposal on the table. And it was, Sesh thought, the proposal of a man determined to get one clean data point out of this world by any means the regulations allowed. "A single non-contact sample," Threll said. "One animal. A biological dart, tissue and blood, nothing more, self-extracting. The animal feels a sting and nothing else. My survey kit carries them. They're rated for apex fauna across the arm. I take one sample from one Solvarn at range from behind the fence, and I have a genetic baseline that tells me what this species actually is, independent of any keeper's demonstration. It is the least invasive measure I have. It touches nothing you value, and it gives me a fact I can stand on." No, Ren said. It's a dart, Keeper, a sting. Your own veterinary kit, surely. We don't dart them. She said it flat and final, and Sesh watched her work to find the patience for one more explanation to one more off-worlder who would not simply believe her. Listen to me. You put a dart in one of them, that animal feels a sting it can't account for, and it goes down even a little, even wobbly, even for a minute, and here is what the pack does. The pack does not run. The pack does not scatter. The pack closes on the one that went down, because a packmate that suddenly can't stand is a packmate under attack by a thing they can't see, and the whole line will come to the fence to find the thing that did it. And the thing that did it, Prefect, will be standing right there behind the fence with a dart gun still warm in his hands, and I will not be able to tell them it wasn't him, because it was. She put both hands flat on the table. You want to know the one thing that undoes 90 years of my family standing in that grass? A downed packmate and a stranger holding the reason. That's it. That's the one thing. My father wrote it in red at the top of every protocol we have. You do not ever cause one of them to fall. Not with a dart, not with a net, not with a sound that drops them. Because they will find out who did it, and the answer will be you, and then you find out what they are. Threll was quiet for a moment. Then how, he said, do you treat them when one is injured, when one is sick? You cannot tell me that in 90 years, no keeper has ever had to put hands on a Solvarn that needed it. And that, Sesh saw, was the question that finally landed, because it was not a challenge. It was, for the first time, an actual question asked in good faith, the question of a man who had begun, despite himself, against 40 years of training, to want to understand rather than to test. We wait for them to bring it to us, Ren said, and something in her voice changed on it, gentled. That's how. When one's hurt, when one's sick, when a whelping goes wrong, they bring it to the fence. They lay it down at the gate and they draw back and they let us come out to it, and they stand and watch while we do what we can, and if it lives they take it back, and if it doesn't they take it away, and we never see where. They ask us. We don't take. In 90 years, not one keeper has ever put a hand on a Solvarn that the pack didn't first lay at our feet and ask us to. That's the whole relationship, Prefect, in one sentence. They ask. We answer. Nobody takes anything from anybody. She straightened. You want a genetic sample. Someday one of them will die of being old, the way Bishop will, years from now, and the pack will lay him at the gate for us to bury the way they laid my father in the open for us to take. And on that day, if you've earned the right to still be corresponding with this station, I will cut a lock of his coat and send it up to your archive myself, freely given, and you can have your baseline. But you will not dart one of my pack to get it 4 decades early. You'll wait and you'll ask like everyone else who lives here. That's the price of the fact. It's the only price there is. Threll looked at her for a long moment. And then he did a thing Sesh had not seen him do in 2 days, which was to close his slate without logging anything at all. Withdraw the proposal, he said. Strike it from the record. I won't dart them. He was quiet and then, half to himself, you keep answering my questions with the same answer, Keeper, in different words, and I keep failing to hear it. You don't take, they ask. Nobody takes anything from anybody. He turned the sentence over as though it were a stone he'd picked up expecting it to be light and found unaccountably heavy. That is not how the concordance is built. The concordance is built on the orderly taking of things, resources, findings, samples, ground, with the taking made polite by procedure. And you've made 100-year peace with the worst pack in the arm on the single principle that nobody takes. I begin to think that is the whole of it. Not calm, not rapport. Just that. You are the one species in the arm that walked onto a deathworld and did not try to take anything from it. That night, unable to sleep in the narrow guest bunk, Sesh got up and went to the gantry and found that he was not the only one who could not sleep. Out past the fence in the dark, the North Pack was at the line. Not agitated, just there, a long low presence in the starlight, 40 of them settled in the grass facing the station, facing the strange ship on the pad and the strange sense it had brought, keeping their patient, unhurried watch on the new thing in their world. And down at the north gate, on the inside of the fence, A small figure sat with her back against a post and an old dog across her lap, keeping the pack company through the dark the way you'd sit up with anyone uneasy in the night. And Sesh understood that she had come out here so the pack would have a known thing at the fence, while the unknown ship sat on the pad, and that she would likely sit there until dawn, and that it would not occur to her to mention it to anyone, because it was not remarkable. It was only the job, which was 40 apex predators and a clogged drain and a family's 100-year promise that nobody, on either side of a fence that did not work, would ever take anything the other had not freely laid down. They got the cost back into its crate, and it went in willingly, which Osprith said flatly she had never seen, and then she sealed the crate and went and stood by herself at the far end of the landing pad for a long time, and Sesh left her alone, because there are kinds of quiet you do not interrupt. Threll did not go quiet. Threll went the other way. He went into the station's small operations room and had Sesh pull the full record, 90 years of it, and he sat with the record until the daylights dimmed, and Sesh watched the prefect's understanding of the situation turn over in real time, and did not like the shape it turned into. "You see it," Threll said at last. He had the record projected across the table, 4 screens of it, survey logs and grant renewals and the thin file on the 4 failed contractors. "You've been reading over my shoulder for 3 hours, Assessor, and you're not a fool. Say what you see." Sesh chose the words carefully. "I see that the containment grant is a fiction the keepers maintain to be left alone." "That is what you're meant to see. That's the surface." Threll turned one of the screens toward him. "Look at the world classification. Category Primal. Do you know how many Category Primal worlds are in the surveyed arm, Assessor?" 9. 9. And of those 9, how many have a sapient presence on the surface? Sesh already knew the answer and did not want to say it and said it. 1. 1. This one, Threll leaned back. "For 90 years the Concordance has carried this station as a curiosity, a hardship line, 6 brave mammals and a very good fence. And I came here to close it, and I was correct to come because the finding I expected to write was true. The fence is a fiction and the world is lethal and the humans should not be here. But I was wrong about the direction of the danger. I came here believing this station was a place where humans die. It is not. It is a place where humans have made the apex predator of a Category Primal deathworld sit down when they tell it to." He let that hang. "The Warden's Kas is the most dangerous single organism the martial arm can field. It cost 400 cycles of breeding, and it holds a line against a boarding swarm, and this afternoon it asked, out loud, to be let off a leash and taken home, because a soft mammal's pets counted it out of a fight without leaving the grass. Now, Assessor, tell me. If you were the Concordance, if you were responsible for the floor under the galaxy, the quiet force that everything ultimately rests on, and you learned that on one death world, one soft young species had made a private understanding with the single most lethal pack in the arm, an understanding your best beast could not break and your best warden could not fathom, what would you write in your findings?" Sesh looked at the 4 screens. He looked at the thin file on the dead contractors. He thought about the girl saying it's for you. It's so people like you can sleep. And he understood, with the cold feeling now grown into something that filled him entirely, exactly where the prefect's mind had gone. "You'd write that it's a strategic asset," Sesh said quietly, "or a strategic threat, and that the Concordance can't leave it in the hands of 6 keepers on a hardship line." "I would write," said Threll, "that it must be assessed, understood, and if it can be controlled and if it cannot be controlled, contained by other means. And I would not write the word closure anywhere in the document, because closure was the mercy I brought for a place where people die, and this is not that place." He folded his hands. "This is the most valuable ground in the arm, Assessor, and its owners don't know it, and my job just changed." Wren found out what the prefect's job had changed into the next morning, when the survey drones went up. She was at the South Pen, thumbing grease into the drain grate she'd finally pulled and cleaned, when she heard them, a thin insect whine, 4 of them, rising off the Concordance shuttle and climbing into the flat white sky in a spread pattern she recognized, because her father had taught her to recognize survey patterns the way he'd taught her everything, sitting on the porch of an evening naming the shapes drones made, and what each shape meant somebody wanted. This shape meant somebody wanted a full biological census. Somebody wanted to know how many. Somebody wanted to map the range, the dens, the movement. She wiped her hands and went to find the prefect, and found him already coming to find her. "Your keepers will assist my survey," Threll said without preamble. "You will provide den locations, population figures, seasonal movement data, and whatever you have on individual animal identification. In exchange, I am prepared to revise my funding recommendation substantially upward. This station is no longer under review for closure. It is under review for expansion." He said it as though it were good news. Sesh, half a step behind him, was not looking at Ren. Sesh was looking at the ground. "No," Ren said. "I don't think you understand the position you're in." "I understand it fine." She set the grease can down on the fence rail slowly, and Meg came out from under the pen's shade and stood at her knee, reading the air between the 2 humans and the alien. "You watched the pack put itself between me and you at the gate. You watched their instinct win against the best thing your whole civilization can build, and it beat it without a fight. And you spent last night deciding that a thing that dangerous can't be allowed to belong to 6 people you can push around. So now you want the maps, where the dens are, how many pups this season, which one's the alpha, and you're telling yourself it's for study." She shook her head once. "My father spent 30 years making sure nobody ever got those maps. I'm not going to be the one who hands them over on his behalf." "Your father," Threll said, "is dead, and this world is not yours to decide the fate of. It's a Category Primal deathworld under Concordance Survey Authority, and I am the Survey Authority. I would prefer your cooperation. I don't require it." Something crossed Ren's face then. Sesh, watching, saw it and would remember it, not anger quite. Something more tired than anger, and older than her 22 years, the specific tiredness of a person who has watched exactly this happen before and knows precisely how it ends and cannot make the other party believe her. "Call the drones back down, Prefect," she said. "Please. I'm asking you plainly, and I don't ask off-worlders for much. The pack doesn't like the drones. They're already up. You put a strange thing in the sky over a Category Primal Apex pack that's been the top of its own world for longer than your species has had a concordance. And they're up, all of them, North Line and South Line, and the 2 packs we don't even have names for out past the ridge. Right now they're just watching. But you keep flying grids over their dens and mapping their pups, and they're going to stop watching. And when a pack like that stops watching, they don't warn you first. That's the whole thing they are. The thing in the grass you never hear. Call the drones down. The drones are automated and armored, and they are staying up until the census is complete," Threll said. "Your concern is noted. Assessor Sesh will log it." And he turned and walked back toward the shuttle, and Sesh, logging it, looked back once at the human girl standing at the fence with the old dog at her knee and her father's grease can on the rail, and thought, with a clarity that frightened him, "She is the only person on this world who is not making a terrible mistake." Sesh did the thing that would define the rest of his career, later that night, and he did it for a reason he could not fully explain even to himself. He pulled the contractor file, not the summary the prefect had read from the raw one, the source records, the ones that had been folded into a 2-line note in the 90-year file. 4 contractors, 4 failures, personnel losses, station established. Sesh was a junior assessor of the provisioning arm, and pulling raw source records was, technically, exactly what junior assessors of the provisioning arm were for. And so he had the authority, and he used it. And he read for 6 hours in the dark of the guest bunk while the death world ticked and settled outside. And at the end of it he understood 2 things. The first was that the girl had told the truth about her father. The second contractor's incident report was there, filed by a survivor, 91 years old now in the records dating and long dead. A landing party, a keeper glimpsed in a pack with no field, a security officer who had drawn a sidearm because the only frames he had for the site were hostage or bait, and a human, named in the report only as the elder Ostrek, first of that name, who had put himself between the weapon and the pack and taken the officer's arm down and said, the report recorded, the following words, which the survivor had thought important enough to transcribe exactly. You point that at them, they read it as me pointing it at them, and then you find out what I am to them. Put it away. The security officer had put it away. The contractor had left. And the elder Ostrek had spent, as his daughter said, the next 30 years building a fence twice as strong as it needed to be and writing a grant that made the fence the story, so that no off-worlder would ever again stand in front of a keeper and reach for a weapon. The second thing Sesh understood was how the elder Ostrek had died, and it was not in the 90-year summary at all, because the keepers had never reported it as anything but an accident, and Sesh only found it because he cross-referenced the supply manifests and saw the year the station had ordered materials for 2 graves. The elder Ostrek had died pulling a keeper out from under a rockfall at a collapsed den. A human keeper, a young one, caught when a den mouth gave way during a bad weather season, and the elder Ostrek had gone in after her and gotten her out and not gotten himself out, and the pack, this was the part Sesh read 3 times, the pack had dug. The incident note, filed by Van Ostrek in a plain flat hand, recorded that the North Pack had spent the night and the following day at the collapsed den, digging 40 of them, working the rockfall in shifts the way they worked a hunt, and that they had brought the body up in the end and laid it in the open, and that when the keepers came for it, the pack had drawn back and let them take it, and then followed the litter all the way to the station fence and stood at the fence, all of them, until it was in the ground. The great gray one, Van's note said, would not leave the fence for 3 days. Bishop, Sesh thought. He was a pup then. The girl said she pulled him out of a collapsed den as a pup 9 years back. He was a pup when this man died digging one out. Sesh closed the file and sat in the dark for a long time. Outside, very far off, something in the grass made a sound, long and low, and answered from 3 directions, and Sesh, who 11 cycles ago had joined the provisioning arm to live a life composed entirely of rooms with chairs in them, listened to the apex pack of a Category Primal deathworld call to itself across the dark of its own world, and understood that the prefect intended to map its dens and count its pups, and that the girl had told them plainly what would happen, and that no one with the authority to stop it was going to listen to a soft young keeper over a prefect of the arm. He went a fine thrall at first light. He had decided to say something. He did not know yet what. He did not get the chance, because at first light the census entered its second phase, and the second phase was the ground survey, and the ground survey required the grid. The census cannot map the dens from the air, Threll explained, at the operations table, with the drone data spread across the screens. The dens are subsurface and the local rock is dense. The aerial passes give me movement and population but not structure. I need ground-penetrating survey along the perimeter, and the survey instruments cannot function through the containment field. The field's emitter frequency and the survey frequency occupy the same band. So the field will be cycled down, sector by sector, for the ground teams to work. 12 sectors, 2 hours each. The keepers will manage the animals in each sector during the down cycle, exactly as they manage them every day. This is, assessor, precisely the thing they claim to do routinely. I am merely asking them to do it on a schedule, with my teams present. Van Ostrek stood across the table with his big hands flat on it and his gray-bearded face very still. Wren stood beside him. Meg lay across the doorway with her chin on her paws, watching everyone. You want to drop the field, Van said, sector by sector, all the way around the station over 2 days, while your ground teams walk the down sectors with survey gear. and you want my keepers to stand in each down sector and hold 4 packs off your teams by hand. I want your keepers to do their jobs, which you have assured me at 90 years' worth of grant renewals they do without incident. We manage 1 pack at a time, Wren said. In one place, when we choose to, on a day when nothing else is wrong, with the whole rest of the line up behind the field, so the pack knows exactly where the boundary is. You're talking about dropping the boundary in a dozen different places over 2 days while you fly drones over the dens and drive ground teams through the range. You're going to have every animal on this world confused about where the line is and angry about the sky, and you want 6 of us to be in 12 places holding it together by hand. She spread her own hands, small and grease-stained, on the table across from her uncle's. There aren't enough of us, Prefect. That's the answer. It's not that we won't. It's that there are 6 keepers and 4 packs, and you're asking for 12 simultaneous management problems, and it can't be done. And I'm telling you now, before you start, so that when it goes wrong you can't say nobody told you. Somebody told you. I'm telling you, don't cycle the field. Threll looked at her for a long moment. Sector 1 is the north line, he said. We begin at midday. Warden Osprith's team will run the survey gear. The COS remains crated. I'd like your best keeper on the north pack for the first down cycle, since it's the pack we've seen and the one that seems most settled. He inclined his head, the apology or dissection gesture. That would be you, I take it. That would be me. Then I will see you at the north gate at midday. Assessor Sesh, you'll observe and log. He gathered his slate. For what it's worth, keeper, and I recognize it may be worth nothing to you, I do not enjoy overriding you. I have simply learned in 40 years that the people closest to a thing are frequently the worst place to judge it, because they cannot imagine it behaving in any way other than the way it always has. You have never seen the pack do the thing you're afraid of. I take that as evidence you're managing it well. You take it as evidence it can't happen. Only one of us can be right, and the honest way to find out is to run the survey carefully and watch. No, Wren said. The honest way to find out is to ask the person who spent her whole life with them and believe her. But you're not going to do that, so we'll do it your way and you'll find out, and I hope to every quiet thing that you find out cheap. She pushed off the table. Midday, North Gate, I'll be there, Meg. With me. The old dog rose off the doorway and went out after her, and Sesh watched them go. The small grease-stained girl and the gray-muzzled earth dog, and had the sudden certain feeling that he had just watched the only 2 competent parties in the entire operation walk out of the room. At midday the north sector went down, and for the first hour it went, Sesh had to admit, exactly the way the prefect had predicted. The field dropped along the north line with a soft descending tone, and the survey teams rolled their ground gear out through the gate under Osprith's direction. 2 carts of instrument that hummed and clicked and painted the subsurface onto their screens, and the north pack came up out of the grass. Sesh saw them come. That same weather motion, 40 gray shapes flowing to the edge of the down sector. And then they did not come any closer, because the girl was there. Wren walked the down line the whole 2 hours. That was all she did. She walked it slow from the east emitter post to the west one and back, the old dog quartering ahead of her, and where she walked the pack held, settling into the grass in a long crescent to watch the strange humming carts, restless, ears working, but held. Sesh understood after a while that she was drawing the boundary with her own body. The field made a line the pack could feel. With the field down, the girl and the old dog made the line instead, walking it back and forth so there was never a moment when some part of the pack could not see exactly where the keeper had decided the edge was. It was, Sesh thought, one of the more remarkable things he had ever watched a person do, and the prefect stood at the gate and watched it too, and Sesh could not tell, from the plated face, whether Threll saw it as vindication or as threat. Bishop stayed at the center of the crescent, directly opposite the girl, matching her. When she walked east, he drifted east. When she walked west, he came west. He was reading her the way she was reading him, and the two of them ran the whole down sector between them like a pair of hands holding a rope taut, and the survey carts hummed along in the gap, and nobody died, and Threll made a small, satisfied note on his slate, and Sesh felt the cold feeling ease, a little foolishly. The trouble did not come from the north sector. The trouble came from the drones. Threll had kept the aerial census running. There was no reason, he'd said, to pause the mapping while the ground survey proceeded. The two were on different systems, and so all through the north down cycle the 4 survey drones went on flying their grids over the range, and out past the ridge, over dens Sesh would never see and packs the keepers had never named. The drones flew low passes over pups, and the packs out there, the ones no keeper was walking, the ones with no field and no girl and no line drawn for them at all, went from watching to something else. The first Sesh knew of it was the sound. It came from the west, past the ridge, and it was the long, low call he'd heard in the dark, but there were many of them now, and they were not answering one another the way they had at night, a call, a pause, an answer, the slow conversation of a settled world. They were overlapping. They were rising. And then, from the north crescent right in front of him, Bishop lifted his great head and answered, and the whole north pack came up off the grass at once, no longer a settled village but 40 animals suddenly standing, ears hard forward, facing west. "Ren," said Van on the comm, and his flat voice had an edge in it now. "West lines lit up. The ridge packs are moving. Get the field back up on north. We need to consolidate." "Working on it," came a third voice, a keeper Sesh hadn't met, from the operations room. "North's on the down cycle timer. I can't just kick it back up. I have to run the restart sequence. It's 90 seconds. "Then run it," Ren said, and her voice on the comm was still level, but it was moving now. She was moving. Sesh could see her out on the down line, breaking from her slow walk into a fast one toward the survey carts. "Get those carts back through the gate. Now, Osprith, get your teams in. The ridge packs are coming, and when they come the north pack goes to meet them, and I can't hold a line that's trying to run west." "Prefect?" And here for the first time Sesh heard something in the girl's voice that was not level, not because she had lost her composure but because she had run out of ways to say the thing. "Call the drones down. Call them down. Right now. It's the only thing that stops this. Call them down." Threll was already keying his slate. Whatever else the prefect was, Sesh saw, he was not slow in a crisis. The moment the situation left the shape he'd planned for, he moved to the new shape without ceremony. "Drones descending," he said. "All 4. Assessor, log that the keeper's warning regarding the aerial census is," and that was as far as he got because that was when the grid failed. It did not fail like a machine turning off. It failed like a machine tearing. Sesh had the sequence reconstructed for him afterward, by an engineer of the martial arm who walked the wreckage and read the burn patterns, and the truth of it was stupid and small, and had nothing to do with anyone's courage or anyone's arrogance. The containment grid was 90 years old. It had been built, as the girl kept saying, twice as strong as it needed to be, by a man who wanted a wall he never had to think about, but twice as strong as it needed to be 90 years ago, by the hands of one determined human with the materials a hardship line could buy. The sector-by-sector down-cycling had run the main power bus through a pattern of loads it had never in 90 years been asked to run. Up, down, sector after sector, 2 days of it, cycling a system designed to sit at a steady hum for decades. And under the North Sector's 90-second emergency restart, the sudden hard demand of the whole North Line trying to come up at once, while 3 other sectors were still mid-cycle. A coupling that had carried its load faithfully for 90 years, a coupling the elder Ostrek had installed with his own hands and his own doubled margin, finally reached the end of what doubled margin could buy, and let go. And when it let go, it did not drop one sector. It dropped the bus. It dropped all of it. Every emitter post around the entire perimeter of Harrow Station went dark at once, north and south and east and west. the soft descending tone sounding 12 times over itself in a single failing chord, and the low, even hum that had underlaid every moment of Sesh's time on the deathworld. The hum he had stopped hearing the way you stop hearing your own pulse, stopped. The silence was enormous. Into it from 4 directions, the packs came. Sesh was at the north gate, outside it, on the down sector side, because he had come out to log the survey carts and had not gone back in. Threll was beside him, slate still in hand, the drone recall command still glowing unsent. Osprith was 30 paces out with her survey teams and their humming carts. And all around them, past every dark emitter post, the grass was moving, not the North Pack alone now, but the whole world's worth of them. The Ridge Packs pouring in from the west drawn by the drones and the dens. The South Pack. The 2 nameless packs from out past the range. Every apex predator on a Category Primal deathworld converging at once on the one dark warm patch of ground where the wall had just come down, and where a dozen unknown scents stood in the open with humming machines. Sesh did the arithmetic without meaning to. 6 keepers. 4, no more than 4, more packs than that had come, call it 200 animals, 12 off-worlders in the open. And the field down everywhere at once, so there was no line anywhere, no boundary the animals could feel, nothing drawn for them at all. "It's for you," the girl had said. "It's so people like you can sleep." He was never going to sleep again, Sesh thought, with the strange floating calm that comes when the mind fully accepts a thing, because he was not going to live through the next minute. "Nobody move," Wren said. Her voice came across the open ground flat and clear, and it reached Sesh where he stood and stopped him from the thing his body had already begun to do, which was run, which was the worst possible thing, which the girl had known someone would begin to do and had spoken to stop. Nobody move and nobody raises anything. Not a hand, not a weapon, not a slate. Osprith, tell your teams. Everyone stands exactly where they are and you make yourselves small and you make yourselves quiet and you let me and the dog get to you. Do you understand me? Say you understand me. Understood, Osprith said from 30 paces out, and Sesh heard the discipline of 600 containment actions holding a warden's voice together by main force. Teams, hold. Weapons stay slung. Hold. Prefect, Wren said. Sesh, you 2 are closest to me. Stand still. I'm coming to you first. And Sesh, standing very still at the dark north gate with 200 apex predators closing from every direction across the open ground of a deathworld, turned his head the smallest degree he dared, and saw the girl. She had not run. She had not reached for anything. She was walking, unhurried out from the gate into the open with the old gray dog at her left knee, into the center of all of it, into the space where the packs were about to meet. And she was talking, low and steady, a stream of words Sesh's translator caught only pieces of because they were not really words. They were tone. They were the sound of a human voice with no fear in it. The sound she'd said settled Bishop. The sound she was now spending on 200 animals at once. Easy, easy now, that's the way, easy, and the old dog was already gone from her side, already moving low and fast, out ahead of her in a wide, clean arc across the open ground, belly to the grass, head down, eyes up. Wren stopped in the dead center of the open ground, in the exact place where every line of converging predators would cross, and she stood there, a small grease-stained figure alone under the flat white noon, and she lifted one hand, not high, just to her shoulder, palm down. "Bishop," she called, and her voice went out across the whole failing perimeter, and every animal on the world heard it. "With me." Bishop came. He came the way he always came, out of the center of the North Crescent at a dead run, gray and low and silent, and Sesh's whole body seized because the last time he had seen that run it had ended with the great animal folding down in front of the girl. And this time there was no field anywhere and 200 others were running too, and the girl was alone in the open with her hand at her shoulder, and Sesh could not see how it ended any way but badly. It ended with Bishop stopping at her side. Not in front of her, beside her. He came out of his run into a walk in the space of 2 strides and swung in at her left. No, her right. Because the old dog held the left. The dog was already back from her arc and set at the girl's left knee. And so the 3 of them stood in the dead center of the open ground in a line the girl had made without a word. The old Earth dog on one side, the apex of the North Pack on the other, and the small grease-stained human between them with her hand at her shoulder and her voice going out low and steady across the grass. And behind Bishop, flowing in out of the crescent, came the North Pack. They did not come as a mob. That was the thing Sesh could never afterward make the report understand. 200 animals were converging on that ground from 4 directions, and the 40 of the North Pack came in among them and did not add to the chaos. They resolved it. They came in behind Bishop and they arranged themselves. Sesh watched it happen, and his mind kept insisting it was a formation, a deployment, a thing a drilled unit did, and it was none of those things. It was older than drill. They arranged themselves around the girl in a great widening ring, facing outward, 40 of them making a wall of turned backs and lowered heads with the humans and the survey teams and the off-worlders inside it, and the old dog ran the inside of the ring at a flat quartering lope. And the whole thing assembled in the time it took Sesh to draw one breath. The ridge packs hit the edge of it. They came in from the west still at the run, drawn by the drones and the dark grid and the scent of unknown things in the open. 100 more animals pouring toward the meat, and Sesh braced for the collision. For the moment the world's 4 packs met over 12 soft bodies, and the ground turned to the thing the file used the word extinction to describe 11 times. The collision did not come. The lead animals of the ridge pack, huge, rangier than the north animals, scarred along their flanks, came up to the outward-facing ring of Bishop's pack at a dead run, and then they were not running. They checked. All of them in the same instant, the whole leading edge of the western surge breaking so hard that the animals behind piled into them, and the entire ridge pack concertinaed to a halt in the tall grass 20 paces out, and stood there and stared. They were reading it. Sesh understood slowly what they were reading. They had come for open ground and soft prey and no line, and they had arrived to find the ground already held by a pack in good order, a pack that was not panicking, a pack whose apex stood calm at the center beside an upright soft thing that the whole pack had arranged itself to face away from and protect. And an apex pack does not read protect the way a mind reads it. It reads senior. It reads whatever is at the center of a calm, ordered pack. Whatever that pack turns its backs to guard is the thing that ranks. The ridge animals had run in expecting to find the top of the food chain absent and the table set. They had found the table already claimed, and sitting at the head of it, unbothered, scratching the notched ear of the local apex, a small warm creature that did not so much as look at them. And then the old dog came around the inside of the ring and stopped, and turned, and looked at them. Sesh had seen the old collie do this to the North Pack. He had seen a 200-kilo predator step sideways to keep out of the path of 13 kilos of Earth dog. He had not understood until this moment, watching the old gray-muzzled animal drop into her herding crouch and fix 100 incoming ridge predators with that low, unblinking stare, what he was seeing. He had thought it was a train trick, a rapport, a local oddity. It was not. It was the same thing the ridge pack was reading in Bishop and reading in the calm, ordered ring. It was rank, expressed in the only language every predator in the arm spoke without being taught, the language of who is willing to hold ground and who is not. The old dog was 13 kilos and 12 years old and half-deaf, and she dropped into her crouch in front of 100 animals that could have ended her in a heartbeat. And every part of her said she had decided where the line was and would not be moved off it, and the ridge pack read that, and believed it because it was true. The ridge pack sat down in the grass. Not all at once. It went through them in a wave, front to back, the great scarred animals folding down onto their haunches 20 paces out, and behind them the second wave settling, and behind that the third, 100 apex predators of a Category Primal deathworld lowering themselves into the noon grass around a ring of the North Pack, around a survey team, around a small human woman who had, Sesh realized, still not raised her hand above her shoulder. Easy, Ren said to all of them, to the whole world. Easy now, that's the way, nobody's hunting, nobody's hungry. Easy. The South Pack and the two nameless packs came in over the next several minutes, and Sesh watched each one do the same thing. And it was the repetition that finally broke something open in his understanding. Because a single miracle you can dismiss as luck, and a second as rapport, but the fourth time you watch 100 predators run in for a kill and stop and read the ground and sit down, you are no longer watching luck. You are watching a law. You are watching the actual rule of the actual world assert itself. The rule the girl had been trying to explain since the mess hall. The rule the elder Ostrek had built a fence to hide, because off-worlders reach for weapons rather than believe it. On this world, a calm thing that holds its ground at the center of a pack outranks a running thing that does not, and the humans had spent 3 generations being, patiently and without weapons, the calmest things on the death world. They had not tamed the pack. Sesh saw that now, and it was the part he most wanted the prefect to understand and most doubted he could. They had not trained the Solvarn or gentled them or bred the danger out of them the way the wardens bred their Kos. The Solvarn were exactly as lethal as the file said. The girl had never for one moment pretended otherwise. She had said, "Take it back to the crate," she had said. "When a pack like that stops watching, they don't warn you first," she had said. "I hope to every quiet thing that you find out cheap." She knew precisely what stood around her. She simply also knew the one thing the whole concordance did not. That the Deathworld's apex predators had a place in their order for a thing that was calmer and steadier and more certain of the line than they were. And that a human being, a soft, warm, weaponless human being who did not run and did not panic and said easy in a low voice with no fear in it, fit that place the way a key fits a lock that was cut for it before either of them was born. Humanity had not conquered the Deathworld. Humanity had been recognized by it. Sesh was still turning that over, standing very still inside the ring with 200 predators seated in the grass around him, when the prefect, beside him, made a sound. It was a small sound, and Sesh almost missed it, and when he turned his head the smallest degree, he saw that prefect Threll of the provisioning arm, 40 years in the service of the floor under the galaxy, the administrator who did not look away, had gone down, not fallen, lowered. He had folded his tall plated body down into a crouch in the grass, slate abandoned, both hands flat on the ground, in the exact posture Sesh's own body wanted and had not dared. And he was staring at the girl at the center of it all with an expression that his plated face was not built to make and was making anyway. "Prefect," Sesh whispered, "are you?" "She told me," Threll said. His voice had nothing administrative left in it. "In the mess. On the first day. She said nothing happens to me. I logged it as bravado. I logged the objection and the warning and the it can't be done and every word she said to me for 2 days, Assessor. I logged it all as the parochialism of a person too close to a thing to judge it. I built 40 years of judgment on the principle that the person closest to the danger is the worst place to see it clearly." He was not looking at Sesh. He was looking at the girl. She saw it perfectly. She saw all of it. She stood in that mess hall and told me exactly what would happen and exactly why and exactly how to prevent it, and I overrode her, because a soft young keeper on a hardship line could not possibly understand the shape of the galaxy better than a prefect of the arm. The great plated head bowed. "There is a coupling somewhere in that dark fence that a dead man installed 90 years ago with a doubled margin, and it held until I ran it to death. And the only reason I am alive to know that is that the girl I overrode is standing in the open telling 200 predators to be easy. Log that, Assessor. Log all of that. Word for word." "Prefect," Sesh said, "I don't think I need to log it. I don't think either of us is going to forget it." But the trouble, when it finally came, did not come from the seated packs. It came, as trouble on that day kept coming, from the one animal that did not belong to the world. Sesh never learned exactly how the Kos got out. The engineer of the martial arm who read the wreckage afterward had a theory that the crate's containment field ran off the same failed bus as the perimeter grid, that when the coupling let go the crate had gone dark along with everything else, and that a Kos which had spent the previous day being counted out of a fight it could not win by an enemy it could not see had woken in an unpowered box on a hostile world, and done the one thing 400 cycles of warden breeding had built it to do, which was get out and get to its handler. The seals were designed to hold a boarding swarm out. They were not designed to hold a frightened Kos in. Whatever the mechanism, the sound of it reached them across the grass, a shriek of tearing crate metal from the landing pad, and then the Kos was in the open, 2 tons of armored panic, and it did the worst possible thing, which was run. It ran for Osprith. It ran across the open ground, toward the one scent it knew in all that terrible calm, its handler, and its path took it straight through the seated ranks of the Ridge Pack, and a running armored stranger tearing through 100 seated apex predators was a thing even the deathworld's laws had no seated answer for. The Ridge Pack came up. Sesh felt the whole seated mass of them rise at once, the calm breaking, 100 predators surging to their feet as the Kos tore through them, and he saw the day tilt back toward the extinction the file had promised, and he heard Osprith shout her animal's control word and heard it do nothing at all, because the Kos was past hearing anything, and for one endless moment the whole thing hung on the edge, 200 predators and a panicking war beast and 12 soft bodies and no line anywhere. Bishop, the girl's voice cracked across the field, and it was not low now, it was not the easy tone, it was a single hard syllable pitched to carry over everything, and the great gray animal at her side was already moving. The Kos, leave it. Leave it. And then, softer, terribly, the thing Sesh would hear in his sleep for the rest of his life. It's frightened, it's not hunting, Bishop, it's one of mine. Sesh did not see the exact moment, because the exact moment was not a thing built to be seen. He saw the shape of it, the before and the after, with the middle happening too fast and too low in the grass for any eye to hold, and afterward he was glad, in a way he did not examine, that he had not seen the middle. He saw Bishop leave the girl's side. He saw the great gray animal cut across the open ground on a line that was not toward the Kos but ahead of it, the flat intercepting arc of a thing that has run down faster prey than a panicking war beast every day of its life, and he saw the North Pack peel off the ring and go with him, not in a mass but in a spread, fanning wide across the Kos's path, and he saw the old dog, 13 kilos, 12 years old, driving in from the other side low and fast with her head down, cutting the angle, turning the great armored thing the way she turned a salvarn that crowded the trough, and he understood that the pack was not closing on the Kos to kill it. It was closing on the Kos to catch it. Because the girl had said it's one of mine. He saw the Kos's headlong charge meet the fanning pack and break, not into blood, into confusion, the 2-ton siege engine suddenly finding gray shapes on every side of it, ahead and beside and behind, hurting, pressing, giving it no line to run and no throat to reach. And he saw it try to turn and find the old dog there, crouched, fixing it with the low, unblinking stare. And he saw the Kos, the most dangerous single organism the martial arm could field, the floor under the galaxy, do the thing it had done at the fence line the day before, the thing 600 containment actions had never once put into it. He saw it decide it was outranked. He saw the great armored head come down. He saw it stop. And then the grass was still, and the Kos was standing in the middle of a loose gray ring with its head lowered, and its sides heaving, unmarked, untouched, and Bishop was walking a slow circle around it with his notched ear flat and his weight easy, and the old dog sat down in the grass in front of the war beast and yawned. Osprith, Wren called, and her voice had gone level again, level and tired. Walk to it, slow, hands down, palms open, no baton. Walk to your animal and put your hand on it and take it back to the pad. They'll let you. They've got it, it's fine. It's not hurt, walk. Osbrith walked. Sesh watched the warden cross 40 paces of open ground through the seated packs to stand beside her Kos and lay one hand flat on its armored neck, and he saw her shoulders drop, and he saw the Kos lean the smallest degree into the hand, and he saw the ring of gray predators open, unhurried, to let the two of them out. Nobody died. Nothing was torn. 100 predators had come up out of their seated calm, ready to end a running stranger, and a small human woman had called them off it with the words, "It's frightened, it's one of mine," and they had heard the claim and honored it, and turned a rout into a shepherding, and put the war beast back into its handler's hand without a mark on it. They understood her, Thrall said. He was still crouched in the grass, still staring, and now there was something in his voice past awe, something closer to grief. She said it was hers, and they understood, and they gathered it up instead of killing it. Assessor, do you understand what she just did? She extended her claim over the Kos. She had a heartbeat to decide, and she looked at the most dangerous animal my civilization owns, running loose and about to be torn apart, and she claimed it out loud so the pack would spare it. She spent her own standing with 200 predators to save the warden's beast. And the beast is one of the things I brought here to prove she was dangerous. I don't think she was doing arithmetic, Prefect, Sesh said quietly. I think she just doesn't let animals die in front of her if she can help it. I think that's the whole thing. I think that's what your file couldn't hold. It took the rest of the afternoon to unwind it, and the unwinding was, in its own way, more remarkable than the crisis. Because the crisis had been fast, and the unwinding was slow, and required the girl to hold 200 predators in a calm, she could not let slip for 3 hours while the grid stayed dead, and there was no line anywhere but her. She did it on foot. She sent the survey teams back through the north gate first, 6 at a time, walking, while she stood at the center of the seated packs and eased them, and each time a knot of off-worlders rose and moved 100 predators tracked the motion and she talked them down. Easy, easy. They're leaving, that's the way, and the pack settled, and the next 6 went. She sent Osbrith and the Kos to the pad and had the pad crew stay inside the shuttle with the hatch shut. She sent Van to the operations room to keep the restart sequence dark, because the last thing she wanted, she said, was the field trying to come up in 12 places under 200 confused animals. Better no line in her body than a line that flickered. And she kept the old dog working the edges the whole time, the two of them holding the shape of the thing between them, the girl at the center and the dog at the rim, until the last off-worlder was inside the fence, and the only ones left in the open were the girl, the dog, and the packs. Then she eased them home. Sesh watched it from the gantry, where Thrall had finally allowed himself to be walked, and it was the quietest thing Sesh had ever seen, and he could not look away from it. The girl simply stopped holding the center. She let the calm she had been spending run out slow instead of fast, and she began to walk not toward the gate, toward the grass, out into the range, the old dog at her knee, and the packs rose with her and went with her, and she walked the whole world's worth of them back out toward the ridge and the dens under the flat white afternoon, a small figure and a gray dog leading 200 apex predators home across the grass of a Category Primal deathworld, and at the tree line she stopped. And they went on without her, the ridge packs peeling west and the nameless packs vanishing north and the south pack drifting away, until there was only the north pack, and then only Bishop, who stood at the tree line and looked back at her the way he had on the first day. She said something to him. Sesh was too far to hear it and would not have asked her to repeat it. And the great gray animal that a dead man had died pulling out of a collapsed den turned and went into the grass, and the gold green closed over him, and the girl stood a moment longer with her hand on the old dog's head, and then she turned and walked back to the dead fence alone. Van met her at the gate with a flask of something, and she took a pull off it and made a face and handed it back, and only then, watching her hands, did Sesh see that they were shaking. Finally, the way the prefects had shaken at the gate on the first day, the shake of a body that has spent every reserve holding still and only lets go when the holding is done. She had walked 200 predators home without a tremor, and now that it was over she could not have threaded a needle. Sesh found that he had to look away from it, and did not fully understand why, and understood later. It was because it made her ordinary. It made her a tired young woman who had been frightened the whole time and done the thing anyway, and that was somehow larger than if she had felt nothing at all. Threll went down to meet her. Sesh went with him because he did not want to miss it, and because some part of him felt the prefect should not do it alone. The prefect stopped a few paces from the girl and stood for a moment, and Sesh watched him try to find the register for a thing he had no register for, and fail, and then simply speak. "I overrode you," Threll said. "At every step. You told me the truth in the mess hall and I logged it as bravado, and you warned me about the drones and I logged it as parochialism, and you told me plainly, in front of witnesses, that the cycling could not be done and would go wrong, and I told you the person closest to a thing is the worst place to judge it, and I ran a 90-year-old fence to death, and the coupling that failed was installed by your father. And the only reason I am standing here is that you spent 3 hours and every reserve you have holding off a death I caused." He paused. "I have been in the service 40 years. I have never in that time been as completely wrong about anything as I was about this world, and I was wrong in the specific way I have spent 40 years warning younger officers against, which is that I decided I understood a situation better than the person who lived inside it. There is no version of my report that does not begin with that. I wanted to say it to your face before I wrote it, because you deserve to hear it from a person and not from a form." Ren looked at him for a long moment. She looked, Sesh thought, mostly just tired. "My father used to say off-worlders came in 3 kinds," she said. "The ones who see the pack and reach for a weapon, the ones who see it and want to own it, and the ones who see it and finally shut up and watch." She pushed a strand of hair off her face with the back of a shaking hand. "You spent 2 days being the second kind, Prefect, but you came down off that gantry and crouched in the grass with your hands flat and your slate turned off and you watched and you got there. That's more than most. My father buried 2 contractors who never got there at all." She turned toward the station. "Come inside. Van'll make tea. You can write your report at our table where I can read over your shoulder, since you're going to be writing about my family." He wrote it that night, at the mess table, with the girl on one side reading over his shoulder and the old dog asleep across the doorway and Sesh on the other side logging. And it was not the report he had come to write, and it was not the report he had decided 2 nights ago that his changed job required. It was a third thing. And Sesh, watching it take shape line by line, understood that he was watching a man dismantle 40 years of a certain kind of certainty in real time and try to build something honest in the hole it left. Threll did not recommend closure. He did not recommend expansion, or seizure, or assessment, or any of the words he had used in the operations room while the 4 screens glowed. He recommended, in the flat formal register of the provisioning arm, that the containment grid at Harrow Station be rebuilt, twice as strong as it needed to be. He wrote, per the original specification, because the original specification was correct and I did not understand why until it was too late, and that it be rebuilt not to keep the deathworld out but, he wrote, to allow the concordance to continue believing a comfortable thing, which is that a fence is what keeps the humans alive. Because the true thing cannot be safely held by most who would hear it, and the keepers of this station have understood that for 90 years better than I understood it in 2 days. And then he wrote the part that Sesh would carry the longest, the part the girl read over his shoulder and did not comment on, though Sesh saw her go still. The keepers of Harrow Station, Threll wrote, have not tamed the apex species of a Category Primal deathworld. They have been recognized by it. I state this as finding, not as color. The local apex predators possess an order of rank, and that order has a place in it for a creature that holds ground without aggression, and the human keepers, by temperament, by 3 generations of practice, and by a discipline of calm I am not able to fully convey in this format, occupy that place. They are not the pack's masters, they are its senior members. The distinction is the entire truth of this world, and the Concordance's 90-year failure to grasp it is the reason 4 contractors died, and I nearly made a 5th mass grave of my own survey team. He stopped writing and sat for a moment. "There's more," Wren said from over his shoulder. "You know there's more, the part you're not writing." "I know." Threll did not look up. "I don't know how to write it so that it doesn't get this station seized by someone worse than I was." "Then write it so it can't be used," Wren said. "You're good with forms. Bury it where only the right kind of reader finds it. My father did it for 30 years. You can do it for 1 paragraph." And Threll, after a moment, wrote the last thing, and buried it the way she'd asked, folded into a subclause of a recommendation about supply scheduling where no ambitious officer would ever think to look. And it said only this: "The relevant fact about the human species, which this world demonstrates, and which the Concordance should consider carefully before it decides what humanity is not that they are soft. It is that the most lethal pack in the surveyed arm met a soft young human standing weaponless in the open, and did not read her as prey. It read her as one of its own. We should ask ourselves what the deathworld knows that we do not." The problem with the report, Sesh realized in the gray hour before the daylights came up, was that a report was not the only thing that had left Harrow Station. He found Threll already awake, standing at the operations table, and he saw from the set of the prefect's shoulders that Threll had arrived at the same cold place. The 4 screens were lit again. Van had brought a sector of the fence back up overnight, enough to run the room, and on them was the thing neither of them had thought about while the pack sat in the grass, because while the pack sat in the grass, there had been no room in either of their minds for anything but the packs. The census had uploaded. "The drones relayed to the ship as they flew," Threll said without turning. "Standard survey protocol. Everything they mapped in the first day and a half went up to the ship's buffer in real time, and the ship's buffer syncs to the Concordance net on every supply lane handshake, and the last handshake was," he checked, 19 hours ago, before the grid failed, before I understood anything." He put a hand flat on the table. "Partial den maps, population counts for the north and ridge ranges, movement vectors, individual animal identification on the North Pack, including the Alpha. It is not complete, but it is enough that a person reading it in an office 4 systems from here, a person who never stood at that gate, would look at it and see exactly what I saw 2 nights ago in this room, and would reach exactly the conclusion I reached, and would not have a girl to walk them to a fence and cure them of it. They'd see a strategic asset," Sesh said, "on a hardship line in the hands of 6 keepers. They'd see the most valuable ground in the arm, and its owners not knowing it, and they would move." Threll turned from the screens. "My report goes up through the provisioning arm and takes 40 cycles and gets read by 3 people who trust my judgment. The census went up 19 hours ago through the survey net, and it is already sitting in a shared archive that the wardens can query at will. I have written a recommendation that the truth be buried, but the truth is already out of the ground, Assessor. I dug it up myself, with 4 drones, because I would not listen to a girl." Behind them from the doorway, Wren's voice said, "Then we put it back." She had come in without either of them hearing, the old dog at her heel, and she looked like she had not slept either, and she crossed to the table and looked at the census data on the 4 screens for a long moment with an expression Sesh could not name, the expression of a person looking at a picture of the inside of her own house taken by a burglar. "That's the dens," she said. She touched one of the screens, a scatter of subsurface hollows the drones had painted along the ridge. "That's where they whelp. That's where Bishop came from. My mother had that map in her head and never wrote it down, and my father spent 30 years making sure it stayed in heads and never on a screen, and you put it on a screen in a day and a half. There was no accusation in it. That was the terrible part," Sesh thought. She had gone past accusation into something flatter and more tired. So It's on the net. Who can pull it? Provisioning, survey, and the wardens, Threll said. The wardens have standing access to all survey biologicals under a threat assessment provision. If anyone in the arm is going to look at that data and want to act on it, it is the martial arm. And that was when Warden Osprith, who had been standing in the corridor outside the operations room longer than any of them had known, spoke from the doorway. Then it is fortunate, she said, that the ranking warden on this world is me. Osprith had not slept either. Sesh could see it. But something had changed in her overnight, the way something had changed in Threll, and where Threll's change had bent him toward grief, Osprith's had bent her somewhere harder to read. And she came into the operations room and stood at the table with the three of them and the old dog and got straight to the shape of it. I have handled containment beasts for 30 years, she said. I have put the Kos against a boarding swarm and against a rioting dock, and against a thing on Varel's world that I still do not have a clean word for, and it has never yielded ground, and I built my whole understanding of my own competence on the fact that whatever room I walked into, my animal was the most dangerous thing in it, and it answered to me, and so I did too. She looked at Ren. Yesterday your keeper's pets counted my Kos out of a fight without showing themselves, and then, when the crate failed and it ran, your pets caught it and put it on the ground and did not leave a mark on it because you told them it was yours. My beast, keeper. You spent your standing to save my beast. I have been awake all night with that. It was frightened, Ren said. I don't let. I know, the assessor said. You don't let animals die in front of you. Osprith's mouth did the thing at its corner again, and this time Sesh understood it was not contempt. It had never been contempt. It was a warden's version of respect, which looked like contempt because a warden's face was built for hard things. Here is what I came to say. The census data names your alpha and maps your dens, and the wardens can pull it, and I know exactly what a certain kind of warden will want to do with it, because I was that kind of warden until yesterday afternoon. They will want to take one. They will want a solvarn in a crate to breed, to fuse plates onto, to make a Kos out of, because a beast that made a Kos lower its head is a beast the martial arm will want to own. She let that sit. And I am telling you that it will not happen, because the threat assessment provision that lets the wardens pull that data also lets the ranking warden on site file a determination. And a determination from the field outranks an archive query. And I am going to file the determination this morning. And it is going to say that the local apex species of Harrow presents an uncontainable and non-transportable hazard, that any attempt at capture will result in catastrophic loss of personnel. And that I have witnessed this directly, which is true. It is the truest thing I have ever put in a determination. Your keeper caught my Kos without a mark, keeper, and I am going to spend that on making sure no warden ever tries to catch one of hers. There was a silence. The old dog got up, crossed the room, and leaned against Osprith's leg, and the warden looked down at 13 kilos of gray-muzzled earth dog leaning on her with an expression of such complete helplessness that Sesh had to look away. That's the second time an animal on this world has decided about me before I decided about it, Osprith said, to no one. She put a hand down awkwardly and rested it on the old dog's head. I don't know what to do with that. Nobody does, Van said from the doorway where he'd arrived with the tea. You get used to it. Sit down, warden. You look like something the pack dug up. They spent that day burying the truth, and it was slow, patient work. And Sesh, who had joined the provisioning arm to live a life composed entirely of rooms with chairs in them, and had instead spent 2 days on a deathworld watching the shape of the galaxy get rewritten, found that this, the burying, was the part he was actually built for. Threll wrote the report so the recommendation was closure-adjacent enough that no one would look twice. A marginal world, a fragile grid, a brave, doomed little station, funding continued at hardship level out of institutional inertia, and a footnote about the difficulty of decommissioning a Category Primal presence. Boring. Unwinnable. The kind of file, an ambitious officer skimmed and set aside, because there was no glory in it and no return. Osprith filed her determination through the Marshall Channel, hard and flat and true, the uncontainable hazard, the catastrophic loss, the witness directly, and she attached to it a personnel note that the COS had been rendered unfit for further containment duty by exposure to the local apex, and would be retired, which had the double virtue of being true and of removing from the record the one asset that might have made a warden curious. And this was Sesh's part, and he discovered, very good at it. Sesh went into the survey archive with his junior assessor's access, and did not delete the census data, because deleted data left a hole and a hole drew eyes, but reclassified it. He moved the den maps and the population counts and the individual identifications out of the biological threat category, where a warden would find them, and into the provisioning category, where they became attachments to a hardship grant supply scheduling review filed under a heading so dull that Sesh, reading it back, nearly fell asleep at his own work. Harrow Station, a perimeter maintenance materials, projected with ecological annex. The most valuable ground in the arm, folded into a subclause about fence parts, exactly where Threll had buried his one true paragraph, exactly the way the elder Ostrek had buried the truth for 30 years. He'd have liked you, Wren said, watching Sesh work. My father. He spent his whole life doing exactly that and thinking he was the only one who could. He'd have liked knowing a concordance clerk could outbury him. She almost smiled. He'd have hated that it was a clerk who did it, and then he'd have liked it. Both. That was him. Tell me about him, Sesh said, and then, because it seemed presumptuous, if you want to. You don't have to. Wren was quiet for a moment. Outside, past the sector of fence Van had brought up, the grass moved in the afternoon wind, and somewhere in it, unseen, the North Pack went about the business of being the top of its own world. Come to the graves, she said. I'll show you where the truth actually lives. It was never in the archive. The graves were inside the fence, on a low rise at the station's east side, under a stand of the tall gold-green grass that Van kept cut back with a hand scythe because, he said, machines felt wrong up there. There were 2 markers, plain, cut from the local stone, and Sesh read the names a man's, and beneath it a woman's and the dates, and did the arithmetic, and understood that the woman had outlived the man by 4 years, and then had not outlived him by any more than that. My mother, Wren said, knew the dens better than anyone who ever lived. She had the whole ridge in her head. She could tell you which whelping hollow a particular animal came out of by the way it moved. She used to take me out as a girl and quiz me, whose litter, what year, which den, and I was slow at it and she was patient, and she said it didn't matter how slow I was as long as I never once, not once, guessed. You don't guess with the pack, she said. You know, or you say you don't know. Guessing is how off-worlders die. She crouched by the woman's marker and pulled a few blades of grass that had grown up over the stone. She died 4 years after him, not to the pack, her heart in her sleep in the winter, ordinary. The one ordinary thing that ever happened to this family. She was quiet. The pack knew before we did. Bishop was at the fence outside her window the whole last night. Van found him there in the morning before anyone had been inside to find her. They know. I've stopped trying to explain how. They just know. And your father, Sesh looked at the man's marker. The report said the raw file, a collapsed den. He went in after a keeper. After a girl, 16 she was, new to the pens, first bad weather season, went out to the ridge to check a whelping hollow like she'd been told not to, and the mouth came down on her. Wren stood. My father went in after her, got her clear. The rest came down on him. And the pack, she stopped, and Sesh saw her decide to say it, the thing the raw file had recorded in Van's plain flat hand, the thing Sesh had read 3 times in the dark. The pack dug, 40 of them all night and the next day, working the rockfall in shifts the way they work a hunt, and they brought him up in the end and laid him in the open, and drew back and let us take him. And then they followed the litter all the way to this fence and stood here, all of them, until he was in the ground. And Bishop, her voice did not break quite, but it thinned, and Sesh understood he was hearing a thing she did not say often, or perhaps ever. Bishop was a pup. My father had pulled him out of a collapsed den himself, 2 years before, when a den mouth gave way, and there was a screaming gray scrap in the rubble that nobody could reach but a determined human with long arms and no sense. He saved that pup out of a collapse, and 2 years later the pup's whole pack dug for 2 days to bring him up out of another one. Bishop wouldn't leave this fence for 3 days. He was barely more than a yearling, and he lay against the fence outside these graves for 3 days, and my mother finally went out and sat with him, on our side, her hand through the wire on his head until he'd take water. She looked out at the grass. So when your prefect asks whether we tamed them, whether we trained them or gentled them or made pets of the most dangerous pack in the arm, that's the answer. We didn't do anything to them. We just never lied to them, and we never guessed, and we pulled their pups out of the rubble when the rock came down, and they pulled ours out when it came down on us, and somewhere in 3 generations of that we stopped being a different kind of thing to them. That's the whole secret. There's no technique. There's just 100 years of not being the kind of creature that reaches for a weapon. Sesh stood at the graves of 2 humans on a death world and could not speak for a while. "I don't think I can put that in a report," he said finally. "No," Ren agreed. "That's rather the point. It's why my father made the fence the story. The truth won't fit in your forms, and the things that don't fit in your forms are the things your people reach for a weapon about. So we gave you a form you could hold a very good fence, and we kept the truth up here under the grass where it belongs." She turned to go back down the rise. "Your prefect's the first off-worlder in 90 years to stand at that gate and not reach for anything. That's why I brought him inside. That's why I'm telling you this. Not because it goes in a report. Because it doesn't, and somebody who isn't us should know it anyway and carry it, and not write it down." The supply ship was scheduled to lift in 3 days, and Threll, who could have spent those 3 days in the guest bunk drafting the boring report that would keep Harrow safe, spent them instead at the fence, and Sesh understood after the first morning that the prefect was doing something he did not have a word for, which was learning. He watched Ren feed the North Pack, every feeding, standing well back at the gantry rail with his slate turned off and his hands folded, and he did not narrate it or assess it or ask the girl to perform any part of it for his benefit. He simply watched, the way the girl had told him on the first day to watch, and by the 3rd feeding Sesh noticed that the pack had stopped tracking the prefect when he moved. On the first day 40 predators had swung to read him the moment he shifted his weight. By the 3rd day they let him alone. He had become, to the pack, a known thing at the rail, not pack, never pack, but a fixture, a scent that came with the fence and did nothing and reached for nothing. Sesh mentioned it to Ren. "He's learned to be boring," she said, watching the prefect at the rail. "That's the whole first lesson, and most off-worlders can't do it. He's very good at it." She said it without irony, as the highest kind of compliment, which on this world it was. Threll, for his part, had begun to write down the wrong things. Sesh found the slate one evening, left on the mess table, and it was not the report. It was a list, in the prefect's precise formal hand, and the heading was Observed Keeper Practices, Provisional Terminology, and Sesh read it standing up and then had to sit down. The girl's low, steady, wordless tone, the one she spent on frightened animals, the easy now Threll had recorded with complete seriousness as calming register, level 1 ambient, and had noted beneath it, deployed continuously in the presence of unsettled apex fauna. Content irrelevant. Carrier tone is the operative element. Recommend all future station personnel be assessed for capacity to produce it under stress, as it cannot reliably be taught. Her one hard syllable, the bishop that cut across the whole field when the COS broke loose, calming register, level 3 interrupt. Use restricted to imminent cascade events. Overuse degrades response. Her hand at the shoulder, palm down, boundary assertion, static. The slow walk of the down line, back and forth, drawing the edge with her body, boundary assertion, mobile. The operative doctrine of the entire station, and this prefect judges, the single most sophisticated act of interspecies management in the surveyed arm, executed by a 22-year-old with a bucket who does not regard it as difficult. And the phrase, the one she had thrown across the field with 200 predators coming up out of the grass and a war beast about to die. Threll had given it its own entry, at the bottom, underlined once. The claim, Sesh read, verbal extension of pack membership to a third party in extremis. Observed once. Keeper Ostrek, confronted with the imminent destruction of a panicking non-pack animal, the Kos, spoke the words, "It's one of mine," and the apex pack, which had risen to kill, instead gathered and restrained the animal without injury. This prefect does not fully understand the mechanism and does not expect to. He notes only the following, for whatever future officer reads it. On this world, a human being can decide that a creature is under her protection, and say so aloud, and the most lethal pack in the arm will honor the claim over its own hunting instinct. The Concordance has spent its history asking what force stands behind a human's word. On Harrow, the answer is standing in the grass, and it made a warden's Kos lie down, and it will spare anything the keeper calls one of mine. This prefect suggests the Concordance consider, carefully and privately, what kind of neighbor it has, and be glad the keeper is a patient one. Sesh set the slate down exactly where he'd found it. He did not mention that he'd read it, but he thought about the entries for a long time, and he understood that the prefect was doing the same thing the elder Ostrek had done for 30 years, and Sesh had done in the archive that afternoon, building a form that a certain kind of reader could hold, so the truth could ride safely inside it. Calming register, level 1. Boundary assertion mobile. It was doctrine. It was solemn official Concordance doctrine, complete with recommended personnel assessment subclauses, and every dry formal word of it described a tired young woman saying easy to a frightened animal in a low voice. And that was the joke, and also not the joke at all, because the doctrine was correct. It worked. A future officer who read it and believed it would be safer than one who did not. Threll had taken the one thing the Concordance was built to do, turn a living truth into a filed procedure, and had used it, finally, to protect the truth instead of to flatten it. Osprith spent the 3 days on the Kos. The great armored beast had come out of the failed crate and been caught by the pack and put on the ground and had, in the doing of it, been unmade. That was the only word Osprith had for it, and she used it flatly, without self-pity. 600 containment actions of certainty, 400 cycles of breeding for dominance, and it had all come apart in an afternoon when the beast met a thing that outranked it and could not be fought, and now the Kos would not take the harness. It flinched from the baton. It had, in the language of the wardens, failed, and the standing order for a failed containment beast was not a kind one, and Osprith had already decided, before she filed the retirement note, that she would not carry that order out. So she did the only other thing she could think of, which was to ask the girl. "I don't know how to make it right," she said on the second day at the pen where they'd penned the Kos, a low, sturdy enclosure at the station's edge, the Kos standing in the middle of it with its head down, refusing everything. "I have handled it since it was fused. It has never once looked at me the way it looks at me now. It looks at me the way it looked into that grass, like I am a thing it cannot win against and would rather not be near. I made it to be the most dangerous thing in the room, and it met a room where that was not true, and now it does not know what it is. Neither do I. I have handled beasts for 30 years, Keeper, and I have never once had one that was afraid, because I never made one that could be. Tell me what to do." Ren looked at the Kos for a long while. "You can't make it right the way you made it dangerous," she said. "That's the thing you're going to have to swallow. Everything you know how to do is the wrong tool. The harness, the baton, the dominance, that's all how you tell a thing you're above it. This animal doesn't need to be told anyone's above it anymore. It got told hard in the grass and it believed it, and now it's the most frightened thing on the station because for the first time in its life it isn't the biggest, and it doesn't have any idea how to be small." She crouched at the pen rail and the old dog came and sat beside her. "You wanted to stop being afraid. You have to teach it the thing my father taught me. You have to teach it to be boring, and you can't teach that with a baton. You teach it by being boring at it, for a long time, until it decides you're safe. How long? Long weeks, maybe the rest of its life. You sit with it, you don't ask it for anything. You bring the food and you set it down and you don't watch it eat, and you sit, and you're dull, and you're the same dull thing every day, and one day it leans on you instead of flinching, and that's the whole of it. That's what we did to a whole world. One dull day at a time for 100 years. She stood. Leave Meg with you a while, not to do anything. Just. The Koss watched Meg put it on the ground and then watched Meg lie down next to it and yawn. If there's one creature on this station that thing might believe about being calm, it's the one that beat it and then didn't care. Dogs are better at this than people. They don't have anything to prove. And so for the last 2 days, while Threll learned to be boring at the fence and Sesh buried the truth in the archive, Warden Osprith sat in a pen at the edge of a deathworld with a retired war beast and an old Earth collie, and did nothing, on purpose, for hours. And Sesh walked past once near the end of the second day, and saw the Koss lying down in the dust with its armored head near the fence, and the old dog lying a body length away with her chin on her paws, and the warden sitting between them with her back against the rail and her eyes closed, and none of the three of them doing anything at all. And it was, Sesh thought, the most hopeful thing he had seen in 11 cycles of service. On the last morning, Threll asked to be taken to the North Gate. Not to test anything, he said, and Sesh heard how carefully he'd learned to say it. I have no more tests. I would simply like to see it once more up close now that I understand what I'm looking at. If the Keeper judges it safe, I'll do exactly as I'm told. Wren judged it safe. Sesh went with them, and Van, and they walked out to the North Gate in the flat white morning with the old dog quartering ahead, and the grid hummed along the line. Van had the North Sector solid again, running on a temporary coupling while the real materials came on the next supply run. The materials Threll had ordered, twice as strong as they needed to be, and Wren stopped them at the gate and put her hand on the release. Same rules as the first day, she said. You stand behind me, hands down. Whatever happens, you don't reach. But it won't be like the first day, Prefect. You're not a stranger anymore. You've been at that rail for 3 days doing nothing, and they've had a good long read of you. I want you to see what that bought you. She opened the gate. The pack came up out of the grass, the same weather motion, 40 gray shapes flowing to the gap, and then slowing and not breaking around her in alarm, and Sesh saw the difference at once, the thing the girl had wanted the Prefect to see. They came to the gate and they read the 2 off-worlders standing behind the Keeper, and it was not the hard, total, 40-eyes assessment of the first day. It was a glance. It was the way a settled dog looks up when a familiar visitor comes in, marks them, and puts its head back down. Bishop came to Wren and leaned his weight into her and looked past her at Threll for a moment. One long moment. The huge dark eye reading the tall plated shape that had stood at the rail for 3 days doing nothing. And then the notched ear came up, not flat up, and the great gray animal did a thing it had not done on the first day. It looked away. It dismissed him. It read the Prefect of the provisioning arm, the floor under the galaxy, the man who had come to close the station and stayed to be recognized, and it decided he was boring and safe, and beneath its attention, and it put its head back into the girl's stomach to be scratched. And Threll, Sesh watched it happen. Threll received the single greatest honor the Deathworld had to give an off-worlder, which was to be found not worth watching by its apex predator. And he understood exactly what it was, and he stood very still behind the girl with his hands down and his slate off, and something moved across his plated face that Sesh had no name for and did not need one. There, Wren said quietly, that's what boring buys you. He'll never come to you, he'll never let you touch him, but he's decided you're not a thing that happens. On this world from him, that's affection. That's as far in as an off-worlder gets. She scratched the notched ear. My father got exactly that far, and it took him 10 years, and he said it was the proudest thing he ever earned. You did it in 3 days because you finally shut up and watched. He'd have been furious. She almost smiled. He'd have been so proud and so furious, and he'd never have admitted either. Come on, Prefect. Your ship's waiting. Say goodbye to the grass. They did not all leave. That was the thing Sesh had not expected. Standing on the landing pad in the flat white morning with the supply ships ramped down and the loading crews moving the last of the survey gear aboard. He had assumed the shape of a departure. The delegation boards, the ramp lifts, the world closes behind them, and Harrow Station goes back to being a footnote on a hardship line, 6 keepers and a fence and a secret. But the shape was wrong, and it was wrong because of the Kos. The Kos was not going home. Osprith had filed the retirement note the first day, and a retired containment beast was, by every standing order, to be returned to the Martial Arms holding facility. And Osprith had read that order and set it aside the way she had set aside the other order, the unkind one, and had written instead a thing that Sesh, who was becoming an expert in the burial of truths inside forms, admired with his whole heart. She had written that the beast was too destabilized by its exposure to the local apex for transport, that any attempt to crate it risked a repeat of the containment failure that had nearly killed the survey team, and that the safest disposition, the safest for personnel, the phrase she leaned on, because personnel safety was the one argument the martial arm could never refuse, was to leave the animal at Harrow Station under the supervision of the on-site keepers, who had demonstrated the capacity to manage it, pending its recovery or natural decline. She had made it sound like a burden the station was being asked to bear. She had made it sound like the Kos was a problem Harrow was doing the Concordance a favor by keeping. What it actually was, Sesh understood, was a war beast being allowed to live out its life in the one place in the arm where it had learned. It did not have to be the most dangerous thing in the room. "You'll look after it," Osprith said to Wren on the pad, and it was not a question, but there was something underneath it that was almost a question, the plea of a handler leaving the animal she had built and unmade in the hands of the only person who might make it whole. "It won't take the harness again. Don't try. It doesn't need to be anything now. Just teach it to be boring, like you said, one dull day at a time." "We'll teach it," Wren said. "Meg's already started. It'll be old and calm and useless by the time we're done with it, and it'll lie in the sun and flinch at nothing, and it'll be the least dangerous thing on the whole station, and that'll be the most it's ever been worth." She put out her hand, human fashion, and after a moment the warden took it. "Come back and see it. You're allowed. You're not a stranger anymore either, warden. You sat in a pen and did nothing for 2 days. The dogs decided about you. That means you can come back." "I'd like that," Osprith said, and Sesh heard that she meant it, and thought about a warden of the martial arm arranging her postings from now on, to bring her past a hardship line station on a deathworld, to sit in a pen and do nothing beside a retired beast and an old dog, and found that the thought was not sad at all. Threll made his arrangement last, and he made it to Van, quietly, at the foot of the ramp, and Sesh only heard it because he was standing close, and the prefect did not lower his voice, because the prefect had decided, Sesh thought, that he was done doing things quietly that ought to be done plainly. "The grant will renew," Threll said, "at hardship level dull, unremarkable. I've written it so that it will renew itself, in fact, for the next 20 years, folded into a scheduling provision that doesn't require review, so that no officer has to look at this world and be tempted to understand it. You will get your supply runs and your fence materials and your quiet, and the Concordance will go on believing what it is comfortable believing, which is that there is a brave little station on a bad world, kept alive by a very good fence." He paused. "I have also assigned the provisioning liaison for this world. Going forward, all of Harrow's reviews, renewals, and correspondence will route through a single named officer, so that the file never lands on a fresh desk that might read it too closely. I've named the officer. It's Assessor Sesh." Sesh, who had not known this was coming, went very still. "He's young," Threll said, "and he'll rise, the way careful officers do, and in 20 years he'll be senior enough that no one questions why a mid-rank official personally handles the correspondence of one dull deathworld station. He read the raw file when he didn't have to. He buried the census in the archive better than I could have. And he stood at that gate the first day and did not reach for anything, which is the only qualification that has ever actually mattered here. The prefect looked at Sesh finally. I did not ask you first, I recognize that. If you don't want it, say so now, and I'll name someone else, and you'll go back to a life of rooms with chairs in them, which is what you told me on the flight in that you wanted. Sesh thought about it. He thought about the girl walking the down line back and forth, drawing the boundary with her body, and the old dog dropping into her crouch in front of 100 predators, and the Kos lying in the dust learning to be small, and the 2 stones on the low rise under the grass, and the buried paragraph that asked the concordance to consider what kind of neighbor it had. He thought about a life of rooms with chairs in them, which he had wanted very badly 11 cycles ago, and which he discovered, standing on the pad, he did not want any more, because he had seen the thing under the grass now, and you could not unsee it and go back to chairs. I'll take it, he said, but I want to come back, not just handle the file, come back, sit in the pen, learn to be boring if the keeper allows it. The keeper allows it, Ren said from behind them, and Sesh had not heard her come up, the old dog at her heel. You read the raw file when you didn't have to. That was the first decent thing anyone off this world did for my family in a long time. She looked at Threll. Both of you, you can come back. Not many off-worlders get told that. Don't waste it. The ramp lifted at midday. Sesh was aboard, and Threll, and Osprith without her Kos, and the survey gear and the empty crate the size of a shuttle, and the supply ship climbed off the pad and up through the flat white sky of the world the concordance called Harrow and the humans called Tumble, and Sesh watched the station shrink below, the pens, the dead and living fence, the low rise on the east side under its uncut grass, the 2 small stones, the single pen at the edge where a retired war beast lay in the dust beside an old dog. And then the grass took all of it, the endless gold-green grass rolling out to every horizon, and somewhere down in it, unseen, moving the way the thing in the grass moves that you never hear, the packs went about the business of owning their own world. He had come to close it. He was leaving as its keeper of record, sworn without ceremony to spend the next 40 years making sure the galaxy never looked at it too closely. You're quiet, Assessor, Threll said beside him, watching the world fall away through the port. I'm learning to be boring, Sesh said. I'm told it takes a while. The prefect made a sound that Sesh had not heard him make before, and it took Sesh a moment to identify it, because it was not a sound prefects of the provisioning arm were built to make, and then he had it. It was a laugh. A small, dry, tired laugh. The laugh of a man who had come to a death world certain of the shape of the galaxy, and was leaving it certain only that the shape was larger than he'd known, and that a soft young woman with a bucket stood closer to its center than he ever would. Take your time, Threll said. We have 20 years of correspondence ahead of us about a fence that doesn't matter protecting a truth that does. There's no hurry. Learn it right. He turned from the port. I'll tell you the one thing I did learn, though, in case the ship takes my memory of it, which deathworlds have a way of doing to the things you most need to keep. Are you listening? I'm listening. The whole galaxy is built on a single quiet assumption, Threll said. That behind every word, if you follow it far enough down, there stands force, a fleet, a warden, a hard field, a hard kill, and that the concordance holds the most of it, and so the concordance's word carries furthest. 40 years I served that assumption, and a girl on a death world showed me it has a floor under it I never knew was there. Because when she says one of mine, the most lethal pack in the arm honors it, over its own hunger, without a weapon anywhere in the reckoning. That's not force, Assessor. That's something the galaxy doesn't have a word for because the galaxy has never had to learn it, because the galaxy has always had force and never needed the other thing. He looked out at the grass one last time as it vanished under cloud. We should be very glad humanity is patient. We really should. Log that if you like. Nobody will believe it. That's the safest place to keep a true thing in a report nobody believes. Wren watched the supply ship burn up through the sky until it was a bright point and then nothing. And then she went back to work. Because there was a cost to teach and a drain that would clog again, and 40 apex predators who did not care that the galaxy had come and gone. And none of that changed because a ship had left any more than it had changed because a ship had come. She started the cost the next morning the way she'd told Osprith to. She brought the food and set it down and did not watch it eat and sat with her back against the pen rail and was boring at it for hours. And Meg lay a body length off with her chin on her paws. Being the calm the great armored thing did not yet know how to be. And Wren talked to neither of them, because talk was for settling and the cost did not need settling. It needed only to learn, day after dull day. That here was a place where nothing was going to test it and nothing was going to be proven, and it could simply be a large, tired animal in the sun. It flinched at everything for the first week. It flinched at the wind. But on the 9th day, when Wren set the food down and turned to go back to the rail, the Koss got up and followed her the 4 steps to the rail and lay down beside her, near, its huge scarred head not quite touching her knee, and let out a breath that seemed to come up from somewhere under the world. And Wren sat very still and did not touch it, and let it be the bravest thing it had ever done, which was to lie down next to something and not be afraid. There it is, she told it quietly, one dull day at a time. We've got all the time there is. Bishop watched the whole business from the far side of the fence with what Wren chose to read as mild professional interest. The North Pack's apex observing a foreign predator being taught to be small by a girl and an old dog, and she thought her father would have made some dry remark about it. And she thought her mother would have named the exact den the Koss reminded her of, some frightened yearling from 20 years gone, and she felt them both at her back the way she always did up at the pens, not as grief anymore. Most days, but as company. The new fence materials came on the next supply run, and they were, as Threll had promised, twice as strong as they needed to be, and there was more of the good coupling stock than the manifest strictly accounted for, tucked into the supply crates under a scheduling code so dull that Wren laughed out loud when she found it, because she recognized the hand. Assessor Sesh had overordered the parts and buried the surplus in a subclause about routine maintenance, exactly the way she'd have done it, exactly the way her father had done it, and there was a note folded in with the manifest in a careful formal script that said only, for the doubled margin. The specification was correct. S and beneath it, smaller, as if the writer had hesitated and then added it anyway. The Koss. Is it learning? Osprith asks in every message and pretends she does not. Wren wrote back that the Koss was learning, that it lay in the sun now and flinched at nothing, and had that week leaned its whole terrible weight against the pen rail while she cleaned the drain, and had gone to sleep, and had looked asleep, like the least dangerous thing on the whole station, which was the most it had ever been worth. She wrote that Osprith was welcome any time, and that she should come in a quiet season and bring nothing, and expect to do nothing, because that was the only way to be any use here. She folded the note into the return manifest under a scheduling code of her own, and sent it up into the sky toward a young officer 4 systems away who had read a raw file when he didn't have to, and was now, quietly, for the rest of his career, the keeper of the one true thing the Concordance would never be allowed to understand. That was the arrangement, then. That was the shape the whole thing had settled into, and Wren found she could live inside it. The galaxy would go on believing in the fence. Somewhere in a provisioning archive, a boring file would renew itself every year, and a rising officer would handle its dull correspondence personally, and a determination in the Marshall Channel would keep the wardens incurious, and behind all of it, unwatched, 3 generations deep and going on 4, a family would keep doing the only thing that had ever worked, which was to never lie to the pack, and never guess, and pull the pups out of the rubble when the rock came down. They rebuilt the fence at the end of the dry season, she and Van and the other keepers, and it took 3 weeks, and the North Pack watched the whole thing from the grass with the patience of creatures who had watched humans build and rebuild that fence for 90 years and understood it, in whatever way they understood things, as one of the dull, reliable rhythms of the world, like the drift of the herds or the turn of the weather. Bishop supervised. That was Wren's word for it, and Van's too. The great gray animal would come up to the line each morning and lie down at the exact spot where they were working that day and watch, notched ear up, and when they moved down the line he would move with them, and it meant nothing and it meant everything. And on the last day, when the final post went in and the grid came up whole, and even along the entire perimeter for the first time since the day it had failed, the low, steady hum returning to the underside of the world. Bishop got up from where he'd been lying and put his head over the finished fence and pushed his muzzle into Wren's stomach, and she rocked back and took his weight, all of it, feet braced, and scratched the notched ear. And the fence hummed between the station and the deathworld, exactly as though it were the thing that kept them apart. It had never kept them apart. That was the joke her father had built and her family kept, the 90-year joke that had saved 4 generations of off-worlders from their own worst instincts. The fence did not hold the deathworld out. It held a comfortable story up, so that the galaxy could look at Harrow and see a brave little station kept alive by good engineering, and go away reassured, and never have to hold the true thing, which was too large and too quiet to fit in any form the Concordance owned. The true thing lay under the grass on the low rise on the east side, and it walked the ridge in the shape of a gray pack that had once dug for 2 days to bring a man up out of a collapse, and it slept, most afternoons now, in a pen at the station's edge, in the enormous unafraid heap of a war beast that had finally been taught that it did not have to be dangerous to be allowed to exist. And it stood, every morning, feet braced, taking the full leaning weight of the biggest predator in the arm, in the person of a tired young woman who did not think any of it was remarkable, because she had been born on the wrong side of a fence that did not work, and had never once needed it, and never would. Wren fed the North Pack their evening meal and pulled the clean grate back over the drain, and stood a while at the fence in the last of the flat white light, the old dog leaning warm against her leg, and watched Bishop take the pack back out into the grass, the whole gray line flowing away toward the ridge and the dens and the world that had made room for her family without ever being asked. Behind her in the pen, the Koss was already asleep. Somewhere 4 systems away, a careful young officer was learning to be boring at a desk, keeping a dull file that protected a bright secret. And the fence hummed its patient 90-year lie into the dusk, keeping nothing out, keeping the only thing on the whole deathworld that had ever needed keeping, which was the galaxy's ability to sleep at night believing it understood what humanity was. It did not understand. Wren was fairly sure it never would. Her father had spent his life making certain of that, and she meant to spend hers the same way, and the pack would go on being the top of its own world, and letting a soft, warm family stand at the center of it and call the frightened things one of mine, and the 2 things the deathworld knew that the galaxy did not would stay exactly where they belonged. The first was that the fence was a story. The second was that on the worst world in the arm, the apex of the apex had met a human standing weaponless in the open grass, and had not seen prey, and had not seen a master, and had moved over quietly in the oldest language there is, and made room. The old dog sighed and put her weight harder against Wren's leg, ready to be done for the day. Wren rested a hand on the gray muzzle and turned them both toward the light in the mess window, where Van had the tea on. "Come on then," she told the dog. "Company's gone, just us and the fence and the whole wide world again." And the grass moved in the dusk wind and out in it, unseen and unhurried and entirely at home. The thing you never hear went about the quiet business of keeping her,